This is the story of our protagonist, who went from being a high school student who was always bullied by his classmates to becoming the strongest boxer in all of history. And for good reason. Our protagonist can defeat anyone with a single punch. Just like Sung Jin Woo from the Manhwa solo leveling after awakening his powers. But to understand how it all happened, first, you need to meet this jerk named Baik, a teenager who makes our protagonist's life impossible and who, as luck would have it, is something of a genius at boxing. So best coach in the world, whom we'll know as K, the one who trained 5 world champions and who is currently observing Baeksan's skills, who can even spar with professional fighters, like this buff, dark-skinned guy named Steel. The white-haired kid shows great skill even against a professional, so much so that he can dodge and land high-impact punches, with Steel considering him a kid with the talent of a god, but who ultimately still lacks experience. So that after the knockout, Steel admits he only won because it wasn't a street fight. Nevertheless, the sparring session impressed K, so after a brief chat, K recognizes that Baeksan has the skills of a champion, and just when the coach thought he had a new student, a noise catches his attention, which turns out to be a street fight where, what a surprise, the protagonist was involved, and because of that cold gaze you had, K becomes more intrigued than usual. This is because in a fraction of a second, it's as if that kid could see the direction of the punch with those black eyes that hold an immense void. That's why without a second thought, K heads quickly to save the protagonist, and so, once they stop the attackers, the coach asks you directly why the hell he didn't dodge the attacks. You can see that this old man is the first person to realize his abilities. However, he simply replies that it would be a hassle then, since there's nothing left to talk about. The protagonist prefers to leave. K has always trusted his intuition, so if his gut feeling is right, he'll have to test the kid's ability for himself, even if it means hurting him if he's wrong. But damn, the protagonist easily dodged the punch. The coach's intuition was right. That kid is a monster. So he asks him if he wants to learn how to box. However, before accepting, you want to know if it's fun to hit people. K protagonist is driven by this desire. He doesn't care about money or fame. He's someone completely different from the rest of the boxers. So there are only 2 options for his behavior. Either he's always had everything he ever wanted, or he comes from the worst possible environment. That's why the coach replies that of course it's fun to hit people. Human beings are simple creatures to understand. But force is the easiest way to prove dominance, and that action simply drives the crowds wild. So one just has to discover what they're worth and how far they can go. That is the true meaning of being alive. That's why K will give the protagonist his first boxing lesson. The simple but powerful jab cross. K mentions that he'll only be at that gym for 1 month, so that will be enough time for the protagonist to make a decision. And while that's happening, Baeksan's tyranny will continue. Inside a classroom, we meet another of Baeksan's victims, this insecure young man named Jay, who, as expected, was humiliated and mistreated by Baeksan and his crew at different times of the day in PE class. Jay tries to strike up a friendship with our protagonist, talking about how little they like soccer and about what they want to be when they grow up. Jay finally felt like he had made a friend, which is something Baeksan cannot allow. As long as his victim remains defenseless, no one can free themselves from his control. However, there was someone who had changed the dynamic. Baeksan can't believe someone interfered with his plans, so if he wants to keep the status quo intact, he has to show who's boss on his turf. Anyone who gets in his way, only a world of pain and suffering awaits them. And so, when classes end, Yu calmly heads home, while Jay, no matter how hard he tries to be brave, that bully just fills him with absolute terror. Jay always considered himself weak, someone who learned from a very young age that the strongest is who's in charge. What could a simple weakling like him do about it? A story that wasn't meant for everyone. While walking back home, Bon was waiting for him. He felt his message wasn't clear enough, so he went to find him personally to teach him what a real fist is. Yu doesn't seem to have the slightest interest in the threat, so he's immediately taken down. However, our protagonist's eyes still show no expression. Bon, seeing that he won't be able to intimidate him, orders our protagonist to get some money by tomorrow or he'll have to deal with him. And as the bully walks away, he's intercepted by a rival gang where their leader is knocked out with a single punch. Bon was a monster off his leash and didn't care who he hurt in the process. In contrast, Yu was someone cold and calm on the outside, but on the Inside, he was someone completely different. The next day, ready for school as usual. But after a talk with his father where they discussed facing his fears, today he would be someone different. During classes, the bullies didn't bother Jay as usual, which he found quite strange. So he needed to know what they were up to. Our protagonist has been serving as their punching bag all day for not paying his fee. This is the punishment he deserves for his failure to pay. When out of nowhere, Jay orders them to stop. The boy doesn't know what he's gotten himself into. He only raised his voice as a reflex, out of a feeling of helplessness. But it's already too late to change his mind. He decided that today he would be different, so it's time to keep his word. Bon shows his delight at seeing his little puppet finally putting up a fight. And although the bullies didn't know it, Jay had been training in boxing his whole life, since his father used to train him when he was a boxer. After landing a straight and a cross, Jay felt more comfortable in his stance. And seeing this, one of the bully's legs began to tremble with fear. Bon, noticing that his puppet has shown its claws, has decided to find out for himself what this cheap imitation of a hero is made of. Jay decides to go on the offensive, but no matter how many punches he throws at his rival, none of them can hit the mark, and his lack of experience and training are ultimately countered by a counterpunch. This fight is a game to Bon. He knows Jay has wanted to hit him for a long time. The reality is that they are in completely different leagues. Jay feels like he can't win, but as much as he wants to give up, the memory of his father, who never gave up inside the ring, gives him the strength to carry on, with the same determination as Sung Jin Woo from the Manhwa solo leveling protecting his family. Bon is glad that his victim is at least showing some courage. His gaze has changed. It's no longer that of a useless person, so he's going to get serious. This time the punches land one after another on Jay, and while Bon gets excited by the torture, Jay remains focused on keeping his guard up. From so many punches he landed, creating the opportunity Jay had been waiting for to counterattack. The only problem with his strategy is that he had fallen into a trap. Jay had always admired his father. He may never have been a boxer with a great record, but in every fight he always left his heart in the ring. His father was always a hard-working man who to this day is his role model. He wishes he could be at least half the man his old man is. Jay, no matter how dizzy his body feels, will get up again and again even if the result is the same. Even no matter how many times he's knocked down. The warrior learned a valuable lesson from his father. A true boxer gets up as many times as it takes to win. Bon is sick of such optimism, so his games are over. He will hit him as many times as it takes to make him remember the loser he really is. However, Jay tells Bane that he never thought about winning. His real intention was to stop being a coward who is afraid of some pathetic gangster who thinks he's the king of the world. He will never be afraid of him again in his life. Bon flies into a rage. He won't allow anyone to mock his authority. But what the bully didn't count on was that our protagonist had gotten tired of just watching the show. Parallel to this, we find K, who is asked what he thinks about the protagonist, explains that he has always trusted his gut feeling. When he sees a guy, he knows if they will have what it takes to dominate the world. And he got that feeling when he sensed Ryu. But what he saw in you was different. For the first time in his life, he could feel what true terror is. To this day, chills still run down his spine. That kid with the cold gaze looked bored while waiting for the punches, which is strange for a human being. Anyone would feel some fear about getting hit. Kay had to test his theory. That kid managed to easily dodge a punch that could have killed him. In conclusion, that kid is one of a kind. Ryu, for the first time in his life, got nervous. And just when he tried to end the fight, he was countered in the blink of an eye. According to Kay's explanation for you, time flows at an entirely different speed for him. It is as if he sees everything in slow motion. The protagonist is not a genius. He could not even be considered human. He is actually a monster. Ryu does not understand what is happening since he has always had a natural gift for combat, so much so that anyone who tried to provoke him always ended up at his feet. Beating up others gave him a hard-to-explain feeling of fulfillment. As time went on, Ryu's reputation as a bully began to grow, to the point where he fought everyone else. But everything changed when he met this kid. How is it possible that even though the best coach in the world recognized him as a genius, he is losing to a mere nobody? Ryu will show 100% of his strength for the first time. Even if it means killing that poor insect. This is a talent given by the gods. However, Yu was blessed with a power that surpasses any god, the one who stands above all. Ryu had to accept that he was a king without a crown on a summit, but what he never imagined was that there was a bigger world beyond him. The bully woke up a few hours later inside the hospital, and a feeling he had never experienced in his life began to surface. That feeling was the bitter taste of defeat. At the age of 17 years old, Ryu began to cry like the 5-year-old boy he once was. Parallel to this, Kei is fed up with the bunch of rookies who only make him waste his time. For the first time in a long time, he wants something with all his might that he cannot have. And as if it were destiny, our protagonist walked into the gym. Kei's prayers were answered. The coach asks Yu if he decided to accept his offer, to which Yu replies that he has. He just has one small condition. If he can pay a hospital bill, he will agree to follow him. Kei asks if Ryu was a worthy opponent, but upon hearing that, in reality he was not. He could not help but let out a huge laugh and ask Yu to take him to the hospital. The coach is surprised by Ryu's condition. He knew Ryu was a genius, but it never crossed his mind that he would end up like this. However, Yu also went to see his friend Jay, but the moment Jay saw him, it was time to go home. Kei, seeing the deplorable life his new pupil has, mentions that once he finishes the paperwork, he will come back for him. This will be the beginning of his new life, where some were destined for greatness, others are simply cast aside. In this irrational and unjust world, only the will of the brave shall remain. They are the only ones who must hold their heads high. The day of truth has arrived. Our protagonists are ready for their new adventure. However, since Yu is very scruffy, Kei decides to give him a little makeover and in this way give him a completely different look so that once the flight is over, Yu and Kei are received by the coach's team. We will come to know the man as Patrick, while the girl is known as Carmen. The young woman is intrigued if this is the new prospect for her boss. And so, after asking the protagonist for his bags, they decide to take him to what will now be his new home, a place completely different from the pigsty he used to live in. But there is no time to waste. Kei decides to take Yu to his gym, the Lion Boxing Club, home to multiple world champions who were trained by Kei. Each one was in a class of their own, but the heavyweight champion Aaron Tai was the best of everyone. However, due to some business, he decided to switch gyms. Kei explains to his pupil that he has a long way to go to be like the champion, but among all his lessons, he must understand that there are other monsters out there like him. And as a first lesson, it would be a good idea to learn from the boxing of Aaron Tig. The champion is a total beast who with just brute force manages to knock out the rank #1 in his division. The fight didn't even last past the first round and the champion managed to remain undefeated. Kei tried to show the protagonist how glorious fame is. Someday everyone will be cheering his name and he will be the one to turn him into the future king of the sport. The moment that this old man has waited for so long has finally arrived. His greatest wish on this planet. Very soon it will become a reality. The day might have ended, but Yu can't fall asleep. The traumas of his childhood continue to haunt him, although fortunately for him, his best friend makes the pain more tolerable. The next day, at the gym, Kei is confronted by one of his students. This red-haired kid we'll call Josh, who upon being completely sidelined from Coach Kei's teachings, is given a chance that if he can defeat Yu, Kei will make him a world champion. The news spread fast throughout the gym. No one believes Josh has a chance. All of Kei's students have been considered geniuses, so he has no chance of winning. Josh has always been considered just another guy in the crowd, someone replaced, so this is his last chance to prove his worth. And even though his opponent seems like a weakling, one of the best boxers at the gym makes a clarification that their coach always chooses someone beyond expectations. Kei decides it's a good time to give his first lesson to the protagonist. From now until the day he retires, he is not to let himself get hit. That's all he needs to know for the first round, so that the moment the bell rings, Josh decides to lunge at him with all his strength. So surprising that if it were up to Kei, he would already have him fighting with the professionals right now. However, it's still too early for that. And so, after a few seconds, Josh finds himself exhausted from all the punches he tried to land, while Yu doesn't have a single drop of sweat on him. The kid now understands why his coach was so arrogant. From the very beginning, he placed a wall in front of him that he could never get through and felt proud of his skills. He was the one who worked the hardest at the gym. After all, he who strives more than anyone else is destined for glory, just like the greats. But why did life have to be so unfair to him? Kay acknowledges that Josh has some strong points, but in none of them can he surpass. Yeah, there's nothing that can be done against such overwhelming talent, but that doesn't mean he should feel completely useless. In fact, the match is about to end. Kay decides to give the protagonist his second lesson. Anyone who gets hit on the chin will get knocked out. In other words, boxing is about dodging well and hitting well. Two directions that are so simple to understand, yet countless boxers spend their entire lives trying to perfect them. But, however, geniuses are capable of moving in different ways. They, instead of receiving instructions, should be given simple goals since they are the pinnacle of boxing. Josh acknowledges that his opponent is impressive, but this is where his experience gives him an edge. If he can prolong the fight, he will eventually win. Or until then. Nevertheless, his whole strategy fell apart in the blink of an eye. The moment Josh regains consciousness, the match was over, and so were all his hopes of continuing to box. Yu tries to calm the situation and offers Josh a rematch. However, the redhead's ego is completely crushed. He doesn't need any more humiliation. And just before the protagonist leaves, Josh needs to ask him a question. There's a rumor going around that where he comes from, there's another fighter that Kay has his eye on, so he wants to know if that guy was also stronger than him, the protagonist. Hearing his opponent's question, can't help but think of his friend Jay instead of Bon, so he replies that he probably was. And as the protagonist leaves, Josh has decided to retire from the world of boxing. Years passed. And now in the Big Apple, we meet Peter Kent, the best reporter in the boxing world, who has actually been keeping a close eye on Kay's work, which is why he feels a great deal of interest in meeting his next champion, the one he has been training for the last couple of years. All that effort and dedication to his new life have owned body. So it's time for his first professional fight, where this guy named John Taker will be his opponent. A man with the nickname the Rookie Killer, because despite not having the best professional record, he has been the reason countless future prospects have dropped out. His close-range fighting style and dirty tricks make him a feared opponent. Peter acknowledges that John's moves are good, although what he's really practicing is his headlock, a very dirty move that allows him to land punches that look accidental, and this is because he feints a clinch. John's coach informs his champion that he has visitors. That's why after training, John points out that reporters have never come to interview him, so his next victim must be very famous. However, it doesn't matter who his opponent is, the result will be the same. Just thinking about it, John starts to lose his mind. Peter points out that he actually enjoys his role as the villain of the story. It even reminds him of the sadism of the middleweight champion, Fabricio Santorino, which is a huge compliment for John. The Santorinos are major figures within the sport. Peter can't help but be ecstatic. It seems the World Boxing Council planned everything perfectly. They chose the best showman for the debut of the future top prospect. However, as bad as John may seem, the truth is he's someone completely different. The day of the fight has arrived, and as he heads to the ring, we see a calmer, more nervous side of John who doesn't like what he does. His job has always been to beat up rookies, so he'd better get into character right away. And so, we now meet the commentators. On the left is Martin Oli, a great expert on the sport, while on the right is Bob Norris, a former world champion. The fight is about to begin. The fighters start to enter the ring, and at that very moment, you couldn't help but notice how bright the world stage is. The debut of a rookie who has only trained for 2 years is drawing interest from many people in the industry. Will John snuff out another new prospect, or will you be able to live up to Kay's reputation? The fight between the rookie killer and the future prospect of boxing is about to begin. And the moment the referee started the fight, John planned to pull his first trick after touching gloves. However, his smile vanished in an instant. The chilling look in that kid's eyes sent an overwhelming fear through his entire body. John felt as if his life was in danger. And just when he thought taking the initiative was his best option, a single move from Yu made it clear, not just to him, but to all the great figures in the sport, that a monster had arrived to take the king's throne. John, what just happened? The ring is covered in blood, so much so that the referee had to intervene in the fight. The doctor, after examining John's wounds in his 21 years of professional experience, had never seen anything like it. Usually get are tiny, but what he was looking at were extremely clean cuts. The very thought that a young man could inflict such damage so quickly is terrifying. John can't hear the referee's instructions. His mind is reliving his past traumas. Nevertheless, as soon as he came to, John tells the referee that he can keep fighting. And as absurd as the decision may seem, the fight is resumed. Maybe the punch caught him by surprise, but as soon as John tries to get back up, Yu lands another punch. The fight is really a one-sided massacre. The protagonist plans to end the fight with his next attack. However, a miracle just happened. John manages to dodge Yu's uppercut by a hair's breadth, although no matter how much he resisted, the fight continued as expected. Blood stained the ring more and more, and he was simply toying with his opponent. Such a display of sadism and violence began to make the crowd euphoric. No one can believe that Kay brought them a true demon. John tries to step on Yu's foot to close the distance. The protagonist can see everything. However, according to John's coach, they still have one last chance. If he uses his special move, he'll close the distance and could land a punch that would knock out anyone. The problem is that the crowd loves to see a villain fall. Everyone is cursing John, while his coach wonders if his student is okay with this scenario. John Taker used to be an honest boxer who always had a good friendship with his coach. No matter how much the old man mocked his terrible skills, he always supported him. Even when his career was about to end, John was going to have a fight against Isaac Dresner, a young athlete who would be making his professional debut against him. That young man was so talented that even John knew he wouldn't stand a chance against him. But regardless of his chances of winning, he would still put on a show if this was his final fight. And as expected, Isaac had John against the ropes. Since he was young, his life was steal or be stolen, betray or be betrayed along the way. John has always had to fight his entire life. If it weren't for his mentors, his fate would have been different. Maybe it was a stroke of luck or destiny. However, John's arm got hooked around Isaac's neck, and it was at that moment that his special move was created. The young prodigy had been sent to the canvas, and even though Isaac managed to get up, the fight took a 180-degree turn, resulting in a victory by split decision. The World Boxing Council, seeing they had someone in front of them who could serve as a controversial boxer, turned John Taker into a villain against his will. Since then, the council allowed John to use his dirty moves, and regardless of the outcome, he would always win a large sum of money, leaving the boxer with no choice but to become the bad guy of the story. John Taker had become the most hated boxer in the world, but still, so much violence directed at him makes him feel bad about himself, which is why he adopted another personality to cover up his feelings in a kind of shell. His coach trusts in his student's abilities. That's why he orders him not to give up. John gets a second win. It doesn't matter if his talent is second rate, he will never give up as long as the old man supports him. And just when his special move was executed, everyone present was frozen in shock. Yu managed to land a counterpunch, ended up fracturing John Taker's fist. The fight had reached its end. The protagonist connects a direct blow to Taker's face, making him eventually hit the canvas, and the countdown begins. John's coach tells him not to give up. He should never have acted like a disposable commodity. He is worth just as much or more than any boxer in the guild. John, a few seconds from falling unconscious, tells his coach not to worry. He taught him very well. Everything he knows? There's no need to be alarmed. From the day their paths crossed, he gave him a second chance to turn his life around. It was thanks to him that he was able to move forward. However, as much as he wants to keep fighting, his body will no longer let him continue the match. The fight came to its conclusion, where the demon incarnate was the winner. The crowd goes wild for the best debut they have ever seen. Peter Kent is analyzing the fight. In his entire career as a sports journalist, he had never seen a boxer deliver such a precise counterpunch. He must have aimed for the weakest point of Taker's knuckles. Yu's speed and technique surpass human capabilities. Peter admits that Kay found the strongest of them all. A rookie who will soon face the strongest in the world. When a giant comes into this world, they are destined to change the lives of those around them. For example, Josh, who, upon accepting that he was never destined for greatness, decides that he became an excellent barista. On the other hand, there's Jay, who is training hard for his debut. Meanwhile, as for Beacon, the albino decided to continue his life of crime. But the one most affected by the pale-looking protagonist's debut was the one we will come to know as Giannier Manuel, the lightweight world champion, who after watching Yu's fight was captivated by the protagonist's technique. Although to be honest, he's not the only one, because envy found its way into the hearts of certain people, like Qasim Al-Jahat, who thinks that he can also do the same thing as the protagonist, but much better. It turns out that the lightweight division is about to change with Kasim's recent entry into the division. The man known as the grandson of the head of Korea's largest business conglomerate. His mere appearance in the sport was a topic that everyone was talking about, but nobody thought his debut would be so amazing. Kasim will be the next opponent for you to defeat. And although the winner will have the right to face Janiera for the title. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, Kasim arrived at his gym with the goal of becoming champion. And although his coach thought it was a joke, in a very short time, the redhead defeated all the fighters in the gym. This was due to his unorthodox fighting style, which seemed like something out of a video game. Kasim had such a blessed physique that he could change what is known as modern boxing so that in just 2 weeks, Kasim transformed into a complete beast. The next day, at K's gym, Kasim went looking for trouble since he wants to meet his rival in person. K takes this opportunity and starts to size up the redhead. His hypothesis was correct. Kasim may have a phenomenal physique, but he's still a kitten compared to Aaron Tight. Therefore, he's not someone to be afraid of, but rather it will be a pleasure to watch him get destroyed. That's why he tells Kasim that you went out for a run, and while our protagonist was training, he is ambushed by the redhead, who tried to knock him out from behind. The protagonist decides to defend himself, but to his surprise, his attack was stopped. Kasim tries to intimidate our hero, mentioning that no gloomy guy will be able to lay a finger on him, and to prove it, he can fight today to confirm it. And so we cut to the fight. He has his opponent against the ropes, who no matter how hard he tries to keep his guard up, it's unfortunately useless against the beast's strength. And just like that, with one final move, the challenger is sent straight to the canvas. Kasim takes the victory, but before it's all over, his rival tells him he should take boxing seriously because if not, he'll end up in the same place as him. However, Kasim became the sensation of the moment, so much so that he divided the boxing world into 2 camps. Some praised him for creating a unique fighting style, while others considered him a lucky show-off. Although, if we're being really honest, the vast majority couldn't help but think that Kasim was born to ascend the throne and proclaim himself the new king. So much so that K couldn't help but be happy, so to fight seriously. His next opponent is stronger than anyone he has faced, so the best thing to do is give him the fight of his life. Eventually, the day of the fight arrives. Jean-Pierre is right at the front of the crowd, eager to see who his next opponent will be. But his gaze is specifically focused on someone. The fight for the #1 rank in the division is about to begin. Kasim starts to approach you mockingly, so much so that he even lowers his guard in an attempt to taunt him. Obviously, it was a trap, but what Kasim didn't count on was that the protagonist's speed is on another level, that you previously had to go easy on his opponents in order to give a bit of a show to his audience, but this time he has no reason to hold back. Dodge the impact. According to K, there are only 2 types of people who can dodge a fatal blow. Those who flow at a completely different speed, or those who possess wild instincts. But even if the latter managed to react by some miracle, his body would instinctively tense all its muscles in order to minimize the damage received. The stud Kasim's toned body is nothing more than a perfect punching bag for training. All the braggart's arrogance began to fade away, because as he kept taking damage, he could hear the crowd mocking him. So, in a desperate strategy to survive, Kasim fled the ring in terror. His coach tries to snap him out of it. He must show some courage in honor of all those who work hard. However, Kasim was just doing this for fun. He never thought all the judgmental eyes would be on him. It seems the prophecy of his previous victim has come true, and no matter how ridiculous it might seem, Kasim flees the arena in tears, which results in you being the victor. After that incident, no one ever saw Kasim in a ring again. The days faced the greatest rival of his entire existence. The boxer Neckerman would go down in history as the only one capable of landing a punch on the protagonist. Fatigue was slowly taking its toll on you, so that K sent him to rest for a while. Every boxer deserves to rest from time to time. The only problem is he doesn't know how to relax. Everything on TV is boring. Even trying something different like table hockey and facing the best player in the United States is also incredibly boring for him. Later, at the park, you can't take his eyes off a family. The warmth they radiate is something he wishes he could experience. Although things aren't all bad, since the young fan is the first person to ask the protagonist for an autograph. And although Yu doesn't technically have a signature, he decides to get creative and gives his first autograph of his life. The boy asks the challenger what it feels like to be strong, to which Yu replies that there's nothing special about it. no matter how strong. One is, everyone dies no matter what. Later, as night falls, the protagonist can't help but think on his way home that this feels very similar to when he was young. Although at this point in his life, the only thing that matters to you is his cat having a long life, since it has been his only companion since he was a child, the one who has never abandoned him. Meanwhile, somewhere in a gym, the first true rival of you is ready to take his next fight seriously. Jean-Pierre is a man who leads a privileged life, and although his sweet wife is upset with him for being lost in thought, the champion can't help but think only about his next opponent. Meanwhile, on the protagonist's side, when Carmen takes a break from work, she can't help but wonder what Yu is doing. Ever since she's known him, he does nothing but train. It seems like there's nothing in the world that can make him happy. Well, technically, there's only his cat, and although he shares many personality traits with the champion, as far as Carmen is concerned, even if Yu becomes the new champion of his weight class, that doesn't guarantee his happiness. In parallel, on the champion's side, his coach can't stop thinking about his fighter. Lately, he's been meditating more than usual, but as condition goes, Jean-Pierre has the potential to knock out 3 opponents without much trouble. Back at the Lions gym, Kei suggests to his student that they study the champion. Currently, there are 5 boxers comparable to him in the world. Lightweight Yuto Takeda, middleweight Fabricio Santorino, cruiserweight Victor Grigoriev, and the best of them all, heavyweight Aaron Tig. Jean-Pierre is the only one who has maintained an undefeated record for 10 years. His fighting style is to keep his distance. With his long reach, he can limit his opponent's field of vision from the beginning of the fight to the very end. The challenger is facing a technical specialist whose jab is comparable to that of a fencer. No matter how much punishment one takes in order to close the distance, Jean-Pierre has the experience to escape any situation. And if that weren't enough, his technique is on another level. As he can even box both southpaw and orthodox, his performances are perfect in every aspect of boxing. But no matter how perfect his fights seem, Jean-Pierre aspires to a level of perfection he hasn't yet reached. So if he wants to keep his title, he'll have to achieve it. Before facing Yu, Kei is eager to see what his pupil can do against a monster like him. Although Kei isn't the only one studying his opponent, Jean-Pierre, the more he replays Yu's fight against Kasim, it's as if he can see every one of the protagonist's muscle fibers tensing at the exact moment before connecting a punch. For Jean-Pierre, such a performance was simply a marvelous thing to witness. The problem with obsessing so much over a fight is that Jean-Pierre is acting more and more distracted, so much so that his wife can no longer tolerate it. He always thinks more about his rivals than the woman he swore to love, which seems to irritate the champion because all the stupid lecturing is really annoying to hear. Time has passed since that fight, and now we find ourselves in an interview with Peter Kent. Peter wants to know more about that perfection Jean-Pierre aspires to. The coach tells the reporter that he must experience it for himself. At this very moment, the champion is meditating. Peter had already heard something about Jean-Pierre in the past. He once interviewed a boxer who used to train in the same gym as him. The guy said the champion was strange. He would stay perfectly still, for a long time, and only after hours passed would he be found in a slightly different position. Basically, Jean-Pierre would take the entire day to throw a single jab. Peter never thought that story was true, but if he's been meditating this long, it must be for a reason. The coach explains to Peter that Jean-Pierre isn't trying to relax his body, on the contrary, he's trying to channel powerful stimuli he's experienced, kind of like being in a constant state of survival. But to better understand the theory, it has to be put into practice. Peter, after beginning his meditation, is guided to clear all thoughts from his mind and focus solely on the beat of his heart, which shouldn't have been a problem. So, if a mere mortal with no experience can achieve something like that, just imagine what a master of meditation feels. Jean-Pierre feels every muscle, fiber, every his bloodstream, and even his brain. Jean-Pierre is absolutely connected, with his mind and body as one. He is always seeking to reach the pinnacle of technique. As night fell, the champion finally finished his meditation. And the reason he's dedicated more hours than usual to his training is because everything he's mastered in his career is useless against you. He needs a more intense experience to sharpen his focus, so he's decided to take extreme measures. His sparring partners will be obligated to seriously injure him, but even though they're great athletes, Jean-Pierre defeated them easily. His plan failed, since there was no killer instinct to push him to his limit. To the champion, boxing is the pursuit of beauty. Every part of his body must be perfect, and the belt is proof of who is closest to achieving perfection, which is why he pursues it day and night, finding it to be a sublime beauty. Ever since that fight the other day, Jean-Pierre witnessed Yu's spectacular performance. He knew in that moment that the perfection he had been hunting his entire life was right there. For that very reason, he had to level up. Fighting his gym colleagues was no longer enough. He had to experience what it truly means, to risk your life and be on the verge of death. And truth be told, the new training started to pay off. The champion began to sharpen his senses even more. Even his lifelong coach couldn't believe he had managed such a radical change in so little time. In fact, the change has made him neglect his health and even what little was left of his relationship with his wife. However, this matters very little to Jean-Pierre because he is now in the best condition of his life. But the champion still needs to become stronger. For that very reason, Jean-Pierre went to the roughest neighborhood in his city for the area's mafia boss. They were all carrying weapons that could end your life. Jean-Pierre had beaten all the criminals. The problem was, he still wasn't faster than a gun. In that moment, the champion had come face to face with the perfect scenario. Being in a life or death situation, his body went into an adrenaline rush. Jean-Pierre had finally managed to feel every muscle, fiber, cell, and neuron in his body. Only for Jean-Pierre to looking for a second later that night in his mansion. The champion was creating a painting with his victim's blood where he deepest feelings toward the monster he was about to face. The next day, at the gym, Jean-Pierre needed to quickly release all his adrenaline because after many days of being stuck, he finally reached the protagonist's level. While on the other hand, his wife was trying to drown her sorrows in alcohol. Since she was considered annoying, she has no rush to tell him her problems. And as for Aro, Kay increased the intensity of Yu's training as he must be in peak condition for any change of plans. Kay's severity is such that Carmen is pensive. She knows her boss is a man who only thinks about winning. But things are different with Yu. For that same reason, after the training session was over, Carmen asks Yu for a few minutes to talk. Ever since she's known him, something has been weighing on her mind. She wants to know why he decided to become a boxer. Yu seems intrigued by his colleague's question, but he replies that he's not really sure how to describe it. At that moment when he saw his friend defending him, he saw a kind of light and simply wanted to confirm that's what it was. Although unfortunately, he still hasn't figured it out. Carmen can't fully understand her friend, wondering how it's possible for him to find what he's looking for in such a demanding sport, and so came the day before the fight. When the boxers have their final face-off, Jean-Pierre can't completely hide the emotions he's feeling at this moment. So as soon as the press conference ends, he needs to ask his coach a favor. Under no circumstances should he throw in the towel. He would rather find the meaning of his life, even if it means losing it in the process. When the day of the fight finally arrives, the champion can clearly feel every part of his body. From the way the toothbrush bristles touch his teeth to how his skin makes contact with his clothes, he never imagined that Yu existed in this world, where everything is sharp and clear at the same time. It's simply something so beautiful that it's terrifying. But now, let's get to the main event. Kay tells Yu that the belt will soon be his, while the coach tells Jean-Pierre to enjoy the fight. Perhaps it will be his only opportunity to reach his ideal. Someone is almost able to land a punch on him. The champion is clearly prepared, so much so that Kay admits Jean-Pierre took things seriously from the very beginning, making the challenge more fun than he had thought. Jean-Pierre is so much so that it's as if he's reading Yu's movements perfectly. If Yu got close to attack, he could land a counterpunch. However, the timing wasn't perfect. Yu managed to dodge it, but just as the commentators said, Jean-Pierre has demonstrated why he's in a league of his own. Kay knew that the champion could be considered a genius. Though what truly surprises them is that he has become a monster for this fight. It's admirable that he entered this realm on his own merit. Even soldiers who risk their lives daily might experience what is known as that moment. When death begins to wrap you in its arms, just for a brief second, you can feel that time has stopped. Humans are born with an innate potential, one that allows them to reach the peak of their cognitive abilities, and if it were polished, could allow one to surpass human limits. Boxing is a sport where you seek to prove your strength, but unfortunately, if your opponent is weak, you might never get the chance to demonstrate your full potential. At this very moment, Jean-Pierre is acting as the perfect rival for Yu to unleash his full potential for the first time in his life. that the champion has started to take the initiative. Offensive. However, the day before the protagonist's debut, he was told to simply imitate his rival's movements, which intrigued his coach, who suggested he follow one principle. His skill allows him to see things others can't. Why didn't he dodge there? Why didn't he throw a counterpunch? So, if he wants to win, he shouldn't imitate anyone. On the contrary, he must think and decide for himself. Listening to his instinct is the only thing he needs. To understand? Jean-Pierre is baffled. His opponent could go down in one hit from that stance, but his experience tells him that if he gets closer, he could die. The best option would be to stay on the defensive. It's the first time they've seen the champion down on the canvas. It seems Yu has shown his true self. Jean-Pierre has miraculously regained consciousness. The whole crowd looks worried for the champion, especially the commentator Bob Norris, who stares at Kay in his corner and one man is willing to go. So, during the countdown, Jean-Pierre is lost in thought. His opponent was simply superior to him in every aspect. The champion thought he had reached his level, but Yu's perfection was on a completely different dimension, a place Jean-Pierre wants to keep exploring. And so, as the countdown continues, the champion manages to get to his feet with all his might. The referee thinks if the fight continues, it could be dangerous. The dilemma is that Jean-Pierre's eyes show no signs of weakness, so he asks if he can continue. Jean-Pierre replies that he'll be fine. In fact, it's the first time in his life he's felt so alive. So, the moment the fight resumes, Jean-Pierre knows he must focus every nerve in his body or he'll lose. And by reading the pattern of Yu's movements, he knows he just needs to dodge the first attack to land a counter. However, even though Jean-Pierre turned his neck in order to reduce the impact of Yu's punch, he never imagined the protagonist's strength would be so immense. His plan has failed again, so much so that his coach knows he won't be able to take it. Right now, his madness is the only thing keeping him on his feet. The coach can't understand why his student keeps going. What kind of beauty does he see when fighting Yu? Jean-Pierre unconsciously answers that while facing his opponent. It's as if time doesn't exist. It's simply something beautiful to see every move executed to perfection. The champion has hit the canvas again. And as the crowd cheers for the new champion, Jean-Pierre begins to remember his childhood. Coming from a dysfunctional family, he always saw humans as beings full of flaws that his mother abandoned them to get on with her life, while his father was always clumsy and useless. A situation born from when two adults consummated their love. Jean-Pierre knew nothing good could come from a relationship like that. In fact, that tragic love resulted in his birth. That's why that little boy has spent his whole life searching for a being that transcends humans. The day his mother left him, Jean-Pierre could see his father sink into despair. So from a very young age, he had to learn to be cold and calm. And it's that way of thinking that has kept him on his feet until now. The moment the bell rings again, our protagonist was ready to end the massacre, but as if by a miracle. The round has ended. Kay is surprised by Jean-Pierre's strength. He's become the first person to last a full round against Yu. However, the champion's coach tells him to stop. This is nothing more than a crime scene that isn't over yet. He won't allow his son to be massacred. However, Jean-Pierre asks him, "What is life?" Many live without finding the meaning of their lives, while others die in search of their purpose. So, no matter who tries to stop him, the champion won't let anyone get in his way. In fact, when he was young, he knew his father's intentions when he tried to abandon him. Even his acting was so pathetic it was pitiful. How could a father just abandon his son like that? And although the situation would throw anyone into a crisis, Jean-Pierre remained calm at all times. He never let his emotions influence him. From that day on, his mission would be to find the perfection he never had. And fortunately for him, the being who transcended his expectations was already in front of him. It doesn't matter if this is his last day on Earth. In the end, what matters is knowing his life had meaning. Jean-Pierre's coach knows that Yu intends to finish his opponent. His stance is completely offensive. There's no way Jean-Pierre will make it out of this alive. It doesn't matter if people hate him for this later. Since he was young, he taught him what boxing is and how to be a good man. So he shouldn't be a monster anymore. He should just enjoy his life and the people around him because, in the end, his wife is waiting for him. But as the fight progresses, his wife feels her husband slipping away. The match has reached its climax, and just as the winner was about to be decided, a heartbreaking scream echoes throughout the stadium. Jean-Pierre's wife won't let her man continue with this. She won't allow her husband to be taken from her. The champion was in shock for a second. The words his beloved had just said were actually what he honestly wished he could say to his father. Jean-Pierre has always been the same child who never wanted to be abandoned. His wife begs him to stop. He doesn't have to keep fighting because very soon he's going to be a father. Jean-Pierre has come to his senses to tell the truth. What has he been doing all this time? Is it worth searching for that legendary being, or is true love enough to fill that? Void, the champion, has made a decision because on that day when he lost everything, a warm, fatherly voice asked if he was okay. And after seeing an angelic face for the first time in his life, it was in that moment that he met the most important people in his existence. He doesn't know when happened. But in the end, he also became clumsy like his parents. So it's time to leave the past behind and heal once and for all. The champion has stepped out of the ring, so the match has come to an end. However, Jean-Pierre needs to do one last thing before retiring. The boxer, considered the ultimate synonym of perfection, decides to hand over the belt to the new champion himself. After a long streak that lasted 10 years, the lightweight division belt now belongs to you. Later, after the fight, the coach asks his pupil to get some rest, to which Jean-Pierre asks the man who was his father figure if he too can be a good father. And upon his mentor's affirmation, someone enters the room. Jean-Pierre is visited by his wife, who, with tears in her eyes, can't help but jump on her husband out of happiness. And so, with a record of 38 wins and 1 defeat, Jean-Pierre retires from the world of boxing. In parallel to this, somewhere else, use next. Challenger is deep in thought. He recognizes that the protagonist's strength surpasses human levels, and Kei doesn't plan on being satisfied with just one title. This is how we meet Judo Takeda, the world welterweight champion, who is accompanied by his faithful trainer Misaki. The news of the new champion spread quickly, where some, like Ban, wouldn't take the news well at all, having to vent his anger on whoever got in his way. Meanwhile, others, like Jay, decide to train very hard to aim for a world title. In fact, right now we'll focus a bit on Jay's story, where his trainer Kim Tai-fun, who as a fun fact is actually the old rival of Jay's father, but because of the good friendship they maintain, decided to take his rival's son under his wing with the help of Steel, whom you might have already forgotten. Kim tells his pupil to never compare himself to you. In reality, his fighting style is more similar to Judo Takeda's, but if he has to be completely honest, both Jay and his father have the personality of a legend. At one point, there was a boxer who was respected by the whole world. His presence was like the sun itself, who I actually hadn't told you anything about until it was important. This man, who works at a children's home, is known as Jay, who many years ago met our protagonist. Yu was a child in a deplorable condition, but the moment he crossed paths with Jay, the boxer told him to Yu that it doesn't matter if his world has come crashing down, someday their paths will cross at the top of the world, and since the protagonist took the first step of this outcome, Jay knows it's time to keep his promise, so he decides to return to his old gym, which ironically is the same one where John used to train. The son of boxing needs to get back to his former level if he wants to keep his word. However, before we continue, let's understand what happened with Jay first. A few years ago, Kim was bored with life. He thought Bike Sandrew would be the prodigy to change his story as a coach. But upon realizing he couldn't control someone with that personality, he decided to entrust his future to the only person he trusted. Although he never thought someone with potential greater than Bike Sandrew's existed. Since then, Kim felt his life was passing before his eyes until one day everything changed. His old friend came to visit him at the gym because since he considers him the best boxer he knows his son will be in good hands. Since Jay suffered an eye injury as a child, there's no one in the world who can understand him better than him, because in the end, Kim experienced the same situation during his career. Since then, the coach has trained Jay relentlessly, where his first objective was to make him strong. Jay's tenacity is his greatest virtue, so a brawler's fighting style is ideal for him. However, to master that style requires great physical conditioning, so from the first day to the present, Jay has trained like a lunatic to strengthen his muscles. In Kim's words, his pupil may not have the same talent as you, but Jay is like a tree, it doesn't matter how many times you break it. In the end, a new branch will always sprout, grow, and become even stronger in the future. Time is given equally to everyone. While some achieve feats in the blink of an eye, others waste their time by not being focused, while a few make every damn second count, waiting for their moment to shine. And so, after a long time, the opportunity for Jay to debut has arrived. Although, Unluckily for Huaosti, the kid, his first opponent is Rock Kang, a veteran boxer with a lot of experience, and the worst part is that his fighting style is also that of a brawler. Basically, Rock is like an upgraded version of Jay that he must defeat. According to Kim, this type of fight doesn't usually happen due to the difference in experience, so much so that when Steel hears who his friend's opponent will be, he tells the kid he has no chance of winning. Although Kim thinks differently. That's why if they want a chance, Jay will have to undergo a training regimen as intense as hell itself, which will consist of 2 phases. First, Jay must strengthen his legs and torso. That way he'll develop muscles so tough they will allow him to maintain a close quarters combat for longer. While the second phase of the plan is for Jay to master his footwork to know how to move at the right moment and land a counterpunch where a hook to the liver will be his best friend. A punch so effective that anyone who takes it cannot continue fighting, so that after a few weeks, Jay has gained a significant amount of muscle mass. But there's still one small detail. On the night before his debut, the young man is anxious. So much so that he needs to go out for some fresh air and burn off all the adrenaline with some shadow boxing. His father congratulates him because he has improved. In fact, he came to see his son because he knows what he's going through. After all, he was also a rookie at one point. His father tells him that wins and losses are important in a career, although the moment he met a certain person, he knew there was more to this sport than just a simple result. The one who discovers their own purpose can declare that their life as a boxer had, meaning Jay thanks his old man for the sincere talk they had. And so, the day of the debut has arrived. Jay might feel like he's dying of nerves, so Kim tells him not to be ashamed. In fact, Steel was literally crapping his pants before his debut, so no matter what the outcome is, he needs to prove that all his training wasn't in vain. The fight is seconds from starting. Rock Kang is in fact more intimidating in person, but that Jay has a plan to follow, so when the referee starts the fight, Jay quickly goes on the offensive. Although unfortunately for him, he never considered that Kang would take the initiative. The impact was so solid that it's Jay to the canvas immediately, and Kim is surprised that they fell into Kang's trap. Nobody would think that a rookie, petrified by his debut, would take the lead. Although there's still one thing they haven't discovered, and that's that Jay is very used to taking punches. In fact, that punch ended up calming the hero's nerves so that once the bell rings, Kang pounces on his prey. Kang thought, hey, but the truth is that now he was the one who had fallen into a trap. And took a full uppercut and was sent to the canvas in the blink of an eye. Jay thinks he's won the fight, but Kang's experience makes him refuse to accept defeat. And so, once he gets to his feet, the real fight has just begun. The boxers adopt a brawler stance and try to push back their opponent with brute force. Kim knows that his brother is still too green to win, although in reality he has something that is hard to describe. It's not just hard work. His determination is one of a kind. However, there's still a long way to go. He knows that his opponent has the upper hand when it comes to punching power. But the countless hours he spent training with Steel, a colleague who is several weight classes above him, gave him the tools to move more fluidly and land precise punches when the situation called for it. After a long round, Jay finally took the lead on the scoreboard. So much so that Kang admits that this kid is a tough nut to crack. Anyone else who had faced him would have already lost. Although according to him, there's nothing to worry about. The lack of experience is reflected in the fatigue he's feeling right now. In this way, the next round went the same way. Jay continued to pressure Kang with everything he had. But by the time the round ended, our hero was showing more fatigue than usual. Kim doesn't understand why Jay got tired so quickly. His training was focused on him lasting all the rounds. That's why Jay's father explains what's happening. The explosive punches of a brawler generate more fatigue than any other style. Besides, the pressure his son is feeling right now is the main reason why his energy is draining drastically. For that reason, Kang used his experience and has simply kept pressure on Jay by throwing one or two or punches to intimidate him. Maybe it looked like Jay was shining, but in reality, he was the one being controlled. Kim managed to figure out Kang's plan, but it's already too late. The only thing he can do now is trust his fighter. The bell starts round 3, and unlike the past rounds, Jay can feel how Kang is 1,000 times heavier. That's why the veteran begins to corner Jay against the ropes, begin to tremble. If he doesn't react to the next left hook, this will be the end for him. And, as if by a miracle, Jay manages to dodge the hook by a hair's breadth. Although for Kang, this is just the beginning. as with an uppercut he manages to break through Jay's solid defense to finally land a direct hook to his temple. The fight seems to have been decided. The rookie is sent to the canvas again, and as the countdown begins, our hero admits that the difference between them is overwhelming, but he still has one last ace up his sleeve. Kang can't believe what he's seeing. In the end, that last blow was minimized, as Jay managed to lessen the impact by blocking the punch with his glove. However, our hero reached his limit a while ago, so when Kang thinks about finishing it all with his next attack, Jay begins to remember his coach's words. For Kang, knocking someone out with a straight is an obsession for him, so obviously, he'll leave many openings for a counterattack. Jay has been using his liver hook as a last resort, but unfortunately for the rookie, the experience of Kang is superior to his strategy. He's been waiting for that counterpunch from the very beginning. The fight seems to be over. Jay doesn't. He managed to overcome a veteran's experience, so there is nothing more he can be in this world where only the strongest are respected. Aren't the others who chase their dreams worth something? So no matter how big the difference is, the boy refuses to give up. The only one who can dictate his future is himself. The referee knows he should stop the fight. Anyone in their right mind would, but seeing that determination in the boy's eyes, he can't do it. And just as the fight resumes, Khan once again backs Junda against the ropes with a sea of punches. However, the boy still has something left in the tank. He didn't start boxing to find out if he was stronger or weaker than others. He did it because he wants to discover what true strength is in this fight. Winning or losing stopped being important a long time ago. Time is surprised that the boy still has so much strength left. It's the first time in the entire fight that he's truly made him retreat. However, it's time for this fight to end. Kang, that everyone knows him for. A simple punch, perhaps, but one he has polished throughout his entire career to make it his best weapon. And so, after throwing a punch just like the last one, Jay uses the little energy his weak body has left to dodge the attack at the perfect moment. Although his exhaustion is so extreme that it's impossible to land another liver hook. The fight has been decided. Jay admits it was a good fight. In the end, he gave it his all and has no regrets. But it's as if trance. The memories of that beating Bond gave him come rushing back to him, and as if in a slow-motion replay, Jay manages to imitate his old rival's movements to land that liver hook, followed by a powerful right overhand to the veteran's face, and so, after an intense battle, we finally have a winner. Jay has passed the test and comes out victorious in his professional debut, while some begin to achieve their dreams. Others have their wings clipped. Bond, after a long time, decides to turn himself in to the law to pay for his sins. Everyone congratulates Jay on his performance. Even Kin, who admits he didn't expect to lose, ultimately recognizes that the rookie has tremendous potential. However, he'll have to be on alert for when he faces the champion. That night, nerves once again keep Jay from falling asleep, but this time, they're from happiness. Although the reason he was able to win was because the one he considers his nemesis helped him. Therefore, to gauge his current level, Jay decides to shadow box with the Bond from the past. And even though the boy can dodge the attacks more easily, in the end, there's still a long way to go. Jay admits his defeat, but after multiple attempts, he feels that he has progressed. And so, before going to sleep, our hero needs to do one last test. He wants to know just how big the gap is between him and his best friend. And as expected, it took no more than 1 second for Jay to know that he's not on his level. And to be honest, he's not the only one, as Yuto Takeda is also practicing his shadowboxing. But with one major difference, the punches don't land on him. And although his speed is overwhelming, even while using weights on his arms and legs, the MC's power is so colossal that Yuto has no choice but to keep training. And so, returning to Yu's story, Kei issued a challenge to the #1 ranker in the welterweight division because if it were up to him, he would automatically challenge the champion, but the World Boxing Council has rules and they must be respected. However, our coach makes a declaration of war against Yuto. He tells him to enjoy his belt, because very soon it won't belong to him anymore. In fact, it didn't take long for Kei's request to be accepted. Peter is more than interested in seeing that fight, as the #1 ranker is Elliot Heberg, a Russian with delusions of grandeur, who believes the welterweight division is where the top boxers compete. In fact, he thinks Yuto was lucky to beat Jenier. But once he's done with Kei, he'll be coming for Yuto's head. Though Elliot forgot that he's not the main character, and the fight is expected. But first, let's see how we arrived at this outcome, because in reality, not even Peter could call it a fight. what he witnessed. During the first round, you didn't throw a single punch. It was like watching a professional fight a helpless kid. Even Elliot, an experienced boxer known for his sharp and precise jabs, couldn't land a single hit on the protagonist. The fact that he was the third generation in a legacy of boxers must have been simply humiliating for him, being completely powerless. So when the round ended, Elliot planned to stick to his strategy, thinking that you would get overconfident. However, the moment the bell rang, not even 15 seconds had passed in the round before he was knocked out, and just like that, the fight ended in the second round at 11 seconds. The fight's conclusion was so precise because Kei wanted to send a message to Takeda. Yu is strong enough to end the fight whenever he wants. Their fight is the personification of natural talent versus the representation of hard work. And as expected, Peter wanted the exclusive, so he went to Yuto and Misaki for an interview. The coach asks Peter what he thinks about hard work, to which the sports expert with years of experience replies that hard work is a synonym for loser, an answer that seems to please Misaki. Most boxers always talk about hard work and how much they struggle, but to her, it's nothing more than empty words. All professionals train until they throw up, but in the end, it's their talent that makes the difference. And this is where Yuto Takeda comes in. If there truly is an exception to the rule, then he would be it for the very reason Peter wanted to find out for himself. While Misaki begins to remember how she met him back when he didn't have a single ounce of talent, because, just like in Jay's story, Takeda's father, whom I'll call Tom, a very enthusiastic and cheerful man, was his best friend to ask her to train his son so he could become a man who could defend himself. Misaki didn't seem very convinced, but she decided to accept the proposal in order to help her friend. Although, what she never expected to see in her life was that her new pupil wouldn't have even the slightest shred of coordination. Who would have thought that the kid who seemed completely useless would end up becoming the current welterweight champion? In reality, never gave up on him, because Tom is the husband of her best friend, Miho, who had been inseparable since a very young age. They did everything together and always supported each other through the slightest of problems. However, Misaki's feelings were different, because seeing how he treated Miho differently, she wanted the same attention from her friend. The problem is that her feelings were never reciprocated. And as time went by, Tom told Misaki that he was officially dating Miho, shattering in the process what little hope her friend still had. But despite the pain Misaki felt, she decided to be a better person and give her friends her blessing. Time passed quickly and the friends continued to meet up as usual. Eventually, Tom and Miho got married. Although sometimes life has no compassion for those who wish to keep living with all their might, leaving their loved ones behind with a wound in their soul. Everything happened very fast, to be honest. As Tom was walking back home, he saw some thugs trying to take advantage of a young woman, and since he was a respectable firefighter, he obviously wasn't just going to stand by and do nothing. The problem was that the thugs weren't going to fight fair, and even though Tom had the upper hand, a single cut was all it took for everything to end. Tom achieved his goal and managed to get the girl to run away, but in final moments, he only asked God that his son would become someone strong. The news didn't take long to reach Misaki. Tom had decided to call his best friend and tell her what happened. He regretted that he always had to bother her by asking for favors and that this would surely be their last conversation. That's why, before he lost any more blood, Tom asked his friend to please take care of his son. Time passed since the tragedy, and as if it were a sick joke, Miho had been hospitalized for some time. Her condition was steadily declining, and the worst part was that she would never be able to go back, to wake up. The day Misaki had been dreading finally arrived. Even when her world had collapsed, her student continued to train relentlessly. Misaki asks Yuto why he's pushing himself so hard at this point, to which Yuto replies that his father asked him not to be afraid. That is why he wants to become so strong that his parents will be proud of him. Misaki could empathize with her pupil. Maybe Yuto doesn't have physical talent, but in reality, he has something better. His parents blessed him with an extraordinary mental fortitude. So, no matter how impossible it seems for Yuto to become strong, Misaki will train this boy until he becomes a champion. It's the least she can do to honor the memory of her friends. And although the problem seemed to persist over the years, that was until one day everything changed. He slowly began to undergo a metamorphosis. 10 years have passed since then. Yuto has completed his first goal, to strengthen his body until he was totally jacked based on grueling training every single day. his muscles strengthened significantly. Peter asks Misaki how he managed to overcome the talent barrier, to which the coach uses a graph to make her point. An average person improves, reaches their prime, and then declines, while a genius is almost always at their peak for their entire career. Yuto, on the other hand, was someone far below average. With only 3 years in the sport, he had already reached his limits. Peter looks surprised. How is it possible that a champion emerged from that abyss? To which Misaki replies that everything changed on the day he showed up at the gym in a hospital gown. Yuto Takeda used to be a high school student, and just like in any school, some follow the rules to the letter, others try to fly under the radar, while a few take on the role of the bully. So, for the practical purposes of the story, we'll call this bleached blonde bully Flash, while his victim will be named Yamaguchi. Flash constantly abused the poor kid, so Yuto couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Flash doesn't understand what was happening, but the more he felt the pressure on his arm, he knew that this kid was no joke. His classmates started to talk about what they were seeing, and given the peer pressure Flash felt at that moment, he decides to throw a few punches to teach him that nobody gets in his way. Anyone in their mind would have returned the same punishment to their aggressor. However, he was different, so he just asks the bully to calm down so they can get along from now on. A request that obviously Flash had no intention of accepting, which is why at the end of class he decides to take it out on Yamaguchi again. So Yuto wasn't planning on holding back this time. He told him the first time to leave things in peace. But if he won't listen to reason, sometimes all a person needs is a good punishment to understand. Yamaguchi is surprised that someone saved him. Decides to walk home with his classmate. In reality, he regrets getting him involved in his problems. In fact, he wishes he were just as strong to defend himself. Yuto can see that his new friend is hesitant, so he takes him to his coach so he can learn to be strong. Misaki doesn't seem to like the idea very much. But since her gym is a bit low on business, this is a great opportunity to make money. So she's going to squeeze every last cent out of this poor sucker. Thus began the training. Of Takeda? Yamaguchi is surprised by his great stamina, to which Misaki replies that anyone can be like him. Through effort, people can change and become stronger, but, well, greatness really comes at a price. Later that night after the gym, Yamaguchi is on his way home, and despite feeling like he had an excellent day, the reality is different. His mother has had a drinking problem for a long time, and her only pastime is to belittle her son while feeling sorry for herself for ruining her life. Besides, even though Yamaguchi has intentions of bettering himself, this woman considers her son nothing more than a complete good-for-nothing. Parallel to this, in an abandoned building, a group of delinquents is hanging out, and among them is our friend Flash, who has a long face. So the gang leader tells him if he's still having problems with the guy who hit him, there's someone in his group who also knows how to box and can most likely help him with his problem. Meanwhile, in Yamaguchi's crappy life, the poor young man decides to do something with his life for the first time. That's why the next morning, Yamaguchi looks up YouTube to start training, thus beginning a cardio routine, although it only took half a walk for the guy to realize how difficult it is to train at the champion's pace. Just half a walk was enough for him to understand how difficult training is. His exhaustion is so great that he can't believe Yuto does this kind of cardio, but even knowing how hard it would be, the poor guy barely finished the workout. Even Takeda tells him that he killed it at the beginning. He himself quit several times before finishing the circuit, but in the end of each workout, the satisfaction you feel from giving it your all is incredible. In fact, Yamaguchi related to his friend's words because he had forgotten that feeling of being fulfilled. Later, in the classroom during lunchtime, Flash is eager for them to give a beatdown to that smug guy. The guy his boss recommended is a psycho. He single-handedly defeated an entire gang with his bare fists, so he's dying for Yuto to be taught a lesson. And even though Takeda is still trying to be a good guy and make peace, because it turns out that after knocking out Flash, he left him a short note apologizing. Flash, remembering that mockery of him, has no plans to keep fraternizing with his enemy. So he decides to leave the classroom right away. From that day on, Flash became the laughingstock of the school. All the students were whispering about how he had gotten a beatdown from Yuto. Since then, time passed. The guys continued their routine: work, train, sleep, and repeat, over and over again. However, everything changed. One night, he was heading home as usual when an unknown number started calling him. And it was actually Kasu, Flash's gangster friend, who has a small request for Yuto. He'd better hurry or his little friend will pay the consequences. Also, no cops should get involved. Yuto had no other choice, so he decided to show up, even knowing it was a trap. Then they'd better cut to the chase. Kazu explains to Yuto that it's not rocket science. He's just looking for strong guys, whom he can humiliate in combat for his own amusement. Takeda is sick of hearing so much nonsense, so he throws the first punch. Kazu is surprised by his opponent's skill, by the way he throws his punches. He's clearly using a very orthodox boxing style. And while Yamaguchi starts to regain consciousness, Flash mentions that Kazu is dangerous. In just 1 month, he defeated all the gangs in the neighborhood. His skill is simply on another level. It's as if he were some kind of prodigy. In fact, Kazu has already analyzed Yuto's movements. Although it's him as odd, he might have speed, agility, and know how to throw a punch, but there's really nothing else he can offer. His punches lack talent or anything beyond a simple explanation. In fact, a more precise example to describe Takeda is that his movements are like those of an NPC in a video game, which is surprising for his level. Whoever trained him did a great job with the piece of crap student he had, but once you figured out the movement pattern, the fight immediately becomes boring. Flash can see that Takeda doesn't stand a chance. While Kazu has a very simplistic boxing style, his great analytical skill is what allows him to stay one step ahead. And just when everyone thought that Yuto couldn't fight anymore, the guy is still standing, as he wants to know how someone so skilled could waste the gift he was blessed with. He should use his strength to do good instead of hurting the weak. But Kazu actually replies that he shouldn't get his hopes up, because for him, hurting people is a much more fun activity to do. And so, after a few punches, Yuto is defeated and put to sleep while leaving a tremendous feeling of helplessness on Yamaguchi's shoulders. Unfortunately, most people live for themselves, unable to distinguish between what holds value and what doesn't. While some must still navigate life as if it were a battlefield, Yamaguchi had lost his last shred of hope. And so, from his hospital room, Yamaguchi decided to send one last letter to his friend, explaining that by now, he's far away. He decided to drop out of school to get a job and pay his bills. He might have hit rock bottom, but it could always be worse. The time they spent together may have been short, but he's deeply grateful for having met him. He only hopes that he gets well and moves on with his life. And it was at that moment, something inside Yuto changed. The cocoon he had been trapped in for so many years began to crack. And the only purpose on his mind was to become stronger. And so, we return to the day that Masaki was talking about. No matter how fierce the storm was that day, Yuto escaped from the hospital to see his coach. Now more than ever, he has a purpose. He needs to win back the confidence that was stolen from his friend. So the next day, during training, Saki demands that Yuto push himself harder. There's no way he could beat a genius on an even playing field, so he has to push himself further than ever before. Time marched on. While Yamaguchi continued to work grueling jobs, Yuto trained day and night without rest, and every chance he got, he would go looking for Kazu to challenge him, though the result was always the same. It got to the point where his coach was worried about her student. She wished she could be his mother and beg him to give up on his impossible dream. But as his coach, she had no choice but to support him in any goal he set for himself. A year went by like this. The routine was always the same: train hard enough to face Kazu again, hoping that something would change, until one day, after countless hours of training, Yuto couldn't tell if he was asleep or awake. However, his punches started to change. For the first time, they began to push his coach back. At that very moment, he shattered his growth limit. Next few matches against Kazu, the tide began to turn. And although Takeda kept losing, he analyzed his mistakes in greater depth. The rivals continued to clash, Yuto's growth skyrocketed. Then one day, just as Yamaguchi was about to end his own suffering, after 3 long years of desperation and effort, Yuto had finally reached the level of the geniuses, and just like that, after a long streak of his own defeats, Yuto made Kazu taste defeat for the very first time. At the same time, just before Yamaguchi made his final decision, ray of light appeared on the horizon. The hope he had lost was restored, and in the process, a hero was born. The day of the fight has arrived, and as usual, we have our regular commentators. On the right side, the lightweight champion makes his entrance, while on the other side, Yuto Takeda, The current welterweight champion and the man called the strongest brawler today makes his entrance. However, no one has ever been able to defeat you. Can the champion defend his title against the man considered a monster? This title fight is the personification of natural talent versus hard work. Bob Norris has a question for all the fans. How many rounds do you think the champion will last before he goes down? Can he possibly hold out long enough to pull off an upset? And so, when the bell rings, the champion rushes the MC. He's so fast he manages to avoid Yu's counter. If their plan is going to work, then he'll have to endure all 12 rounds in their training camp before the fight. Misaki concluded that Yu's best punches are from a long distance, so the answer is to get as close as possible. Yuto act as Yu's shadow for the entire fight. He may have supernatural talent, but all of his fights haven't gone past the second round, no matter how talented he is. If he doesn't have the stamina, sooner or later his body will betray him. But, however, Kei had already predicted this scenario. That's why during his talks with Yu, he explained that Yuto's muscular physique allows him to have great stamina. Plus, with that stubbornness of his, he gives the impression that no matter how many times he's punished, the champion seems to have limitless endurance. So he asks Yu what he plans to do about it. The protagonist replies that he'll just have to hit him before he gets close, although that's not how Kei does things. If they're going to defeat Yuto Takeda, it'll be by humiliating him in his own style of boxing. Kei wants to prove to the world the true meaning of talent. Yu was copying his every move, his best weapons that he had spent his whole life perfecting. They were being executed with greater speed and precision, right before his eyes. For the champion, the situation was as clear as day. No matter how hard he trained, he would never be able to land a punch on him. Kei is fascinated with how the fight is developed. He wants Yu to steal all of Yuto's qualities and then trample all over him. This way, he'll learn what it means to be alive. The champion is taking a one-sided beating. The level of dominance is so high that he doesn't know what to do. His feints aren't working, and if he tries to keep his guard up, he automatically becomes a punching bag. The first round is over. Misaki tries to get his boxer to regain consciousness. He needs him to calm down if they want to have a chance. And even though Takeda tells his coach that there's no way, no one is perfect, so they still have a plan up their sleeve. Kei asks Yu what he thinks of his opponent, to which the protagonist replies that he's strong, but Jean-Pierre was superior. That's why Kei tells him not to get cocky. The worse the situation gets, the greater his strength will become. But anyway, it's time for the second round. He needs Yuto to trade as many blows as possible. That will be his best weapon when it comes to boxing techniques. Meaning, instead of falling for Kei's plans, the champion will bring the protagonist into his own playground. Takeda, with each passing moment, takes the fight more seriously and slowly causes Yu to start backing up. However, Bob Norris points out an alarming fact. Yu hasn't taken the fight seriously so far, and from the little that is known about his strength, who knows what his true limits are? So much so that Yuto can see that Yu quickly increased his distance because the main event has just begun. The protagonist's flurry of jabs is so overwhelming that it prevents the champion from getting close to him. And since Takeda failed to close the distance, he left a huge opening in his defense that is quickly punished. Kei is very happy with what he's seeing. The real adversity is starting right now. The crowd goes wild at such a demonstration of power. Well, everyone except for one person. Yamaguchi will support his friend until the end. The champion has been sent to the canvas and seems unable to get up from the pain. The blow may have been powerful, but it's not enough to break Takeda's will. At sporting odds, Takeda began to regain ground in an astonishing way, managing to increase his speed in the process and causing Yu to lose his timing and balance. Kei hates to admit it, but he acknowledges that Yuto's strength is worthy of praise, even without any hope. He continues to fight until his bitter end, although the champion is the first one to push the challenger this hard. Takeda begins to suffer the after effects of so many impacts, once again becoming vulnerable only to take a direct hit to the face. The champion is sent to the canvas once more. The audience begins to wonder if there will be a miracle, but Takeda still has a point to prove. If you still have the will, there will surely always be a way to solve your problems. Yamaguchi asks his friend to stop. He's enduring torture just to give hope to people like him. He doesn't have to keep fighting. His dedication gave him a valuable lesson in the past. Someone who works hard can achieve their dreams, like opening a fruit stand and having his alcoholic mother attend rehab. But that doesn't mean he should take a beating that could threaten his life. However, if he still wishes to continue fighting, if that means putting his life on the line. People like him will support him until the very end, because thanks to people like Yuto who strive day in and day out, there is still hope in this world full of darkness. Misaki starts to worry about the one she raised like a son. The fight has definitively tilted in Yu's favor. In fact, Takeda doesn't know what he's gotten himself into. His opponent is the strongest person he has ever faced. Al doesn't know what to do in these moments. Words of encouragement no longer work like they did in the past. Has she done enough to protect the man her best friends gave birth to? Is she really doing him any favors by letting the fight continue? If only she had taught him to live a quiet and peaceful life. She wouldn't have to watch her boy get massacred. Round 3 continued as expected. Yuto is nothing more than a puppet for our protagonist. However, Kei acknowledges that the champion has heart. Although no one in the crowd might notice it, he is closing the distance step by step. It's simply incredible that he's still evolving at this stage and his performance is like that of a comic book protagonist. And so, the fight continued its course. It seems the champion's plan is starting to work. Courage is the only thing keeping him on his feet. But after a long torture, the champion begins to show signs of fatigue. Kei is intrigued by what his boxer will do, because if he start fighting with the intent to kill, Yuto could surprise him and give the fight an unexpected twist. The crowd demands a result. Everyone has lost count of how many times they've knocked down the champion. Although this time, as the count reached 4, it seems Yuto won't make it. The tears of his ears. Trainer run down her face. That child for whom she spent long, sleepless nights thinking about his future is now lying before her. Several weeks before the fight, Misaki confessed to Yuto that life has been very cruel to her. Perhaps she suffered some tragic moments like the loss of her friends. But one thing she came to understand is that you must be grateful for what you have. No one should cling to the past because you never know what the future holds for you. Misaki came to understand all this the moment life gave her the most beautiful gift she never knew she wanted. Yuto managed to somehow feel his trainer's emotions from throughout his life. He has always had people who loved him, so he can't give up. He has to fight until the end for the love he has for them. I can't believe it. The champion's gaze is exactly the same as the one he saw in the eyes of his friend. The crowd goes wild. This is the resurgence of Yuto Takeda, hard work personified. The Jin entered this world without a shred of talent, but still, he climbed everyone. Although for the first time in his entire boxing career, Yuto Takeda attained what is known as the talent of a genius. However, even though the entire world had witnessed the birth of a monster, the demon that Yu had become was still superior. Our protagonist was not going to waste this opportunity. After so many years of training, he had once again seen that brilliant light. He would not let this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity pass. He needs to see it up close to know if it's perhaps similar to that of that man. Kei begins to cry with joy. In all his years as a trainer, he had never seen such a masterful work as what he has just witnessed. After a long battle of endurance, Yu has become the world welterweight champion. Kei's dream has come true. He has shown the world who will be the new number 1 until the end of time. Moments after the end of the match, Yuto was being carried on a stretcher to the hospital. As taken away, you can see that he has lost the light that was in his eyes. Misaki, seeing that our protagonist is staring at her son, will not let the one who nearly killed him get away with it. However, Kei stops the trainer. In the end, his fighter won the match fairly. Besides, these things happen in boxing. You can lose your life at any moment. And as Misaki tells our protagonist that they are both monsters, from the highest point of the stadium, champion Aaron Tite is watching the spectacle. From now on, he'll have to keep that spiky-haired kid closer, under his radar. The hours passed. Now, at the hospital, Yuto Takeda is out of danger. Misaki is filled with regret for not throwing in the towel sooner. If only she had done it earlier, they wouldn't be in this situation. However, the moment Yuto regains consciousness, with what little strength he has in these moments, he thanks Misaki for everything she has done for him. Yuto knew he was an amateur, someone with no talent, but he always fought with everything he had. Everyone always made fun of him and looked down on him, but it was thanks to his mother, who blindly believed in a nobody, that he aspired to be stronger. She is the real MVP of his life. His end might still come one day, but until that happens, he has to enjoy the beauty of those around him. Days passed since then. Yuto slowly recovered and actually gets visits from his fans from time to time. The Young boy suffers from a rare, undiagnosed disease. In fact, the doctors don't even know if there might be a cure. But even though the outlook doesn't look good, the little boy gets an extra dose of courage every time he sees his hero fight. His determination is what inspires him to keep fighting. Someday, when he grows up, he wants to become a boxer as strong as his idol. Yuto was moved by his fans' words, because after many years he was able to fulfill the promise he made to his father. He truly gave it his all so that in the end, he could be someone just as admirable as him. The tears of joy began to run down the former champion's face. And so, with a record of 31 wins and 5 losses, Yuto Takeda said goodbye to the world of boxing. However, the worst was about to begin because the middle Santorino, who along with his trainer, manager and brother Marco Santorino, are already planning their next fight against the new champion. Their goal is to give the world the greatest show of their lives. Time passed since the championship fight, and after many days, Yu and Carmen are going on a date. The next day at our protagonist's house, after a long wait like any man has to, Carmen is ready for their date. Although, upon seeing her partner's disheveled appearance, she understands this might be new for Yu. The gentleman has to be presentable for his lady from this day forward. That will be the look he needs to have to go out with her. However, Carmen wants to make a radical change. So the start of their date will consist of going shopping. And so, after trying multiple horrible outfits with Carmen a lot of laughs, our protagonist has turned into a total stud. So, since he now looks like a respectable member of society, the date continues at the town fair. And so, after riding the roller coaster, then going to a theme park, and then losing several times at the claw machines, the young couple seemed to be having a pleasant time. The only problem, according to Carmen, was that Yu had to make an effort to smile. If he would just relax his muscles and try, he could manage a smile as sincere as hers, which, unfortunately, he fails to do later, in the haunted house. Since Carmen hates being scared by the employees, she decides it would be a good idea to hug her. Man, though what she didn't count on wearing before them. And while it doesn't scare you, the poor ladies jump out of their skin in fright. Who would have thought that 2 old rivals would meet years later in such a hilarious situation inside the haunted house? Jean-Pierre formally introduces himself to our protagonists, although his wife, whom we finally get to know as Estella, isn't exactly thrilled to see the man who hurt her husband. So Carmen tells her that's normal. Envy and jealousy always seem to follow the winners. The afternoon continued peacefully, where both couples decided to spend a little more time together. Jean-Pierre tells you he still remembers every detail of their match, but it seems he's changed a bit since then. It's as if someone provoked him. In reality, Jean-Pierre isn't one to talk, because when his little daughter wants some ice cream, doting father caters to his little princess's every whim. Who would have thought that the man who only sought perfection would become a happy family man? The conversation continued its course. So Carmen wants to ask Jean-Pierre something. At some point, he must have had a showdown with Marco Santorino, so they want to know more about the 2 brothers. Jean-Pierre points out that Marco wasn't someone with a remarkable physique, but when it comes to IQ, he surpasses anyone he has ever faced. If only he had been blessed with a stronger physique, the belt would have changed owners a long time ago. But the greatest quality of those 2 brothers is their terrifying obsession. The date has come to an end, and as Yu and Carmen leave, the former champion can't help but think about something. His old rival has changed a lot since he fell in love, so he doesn't come back down to earth. He could lose if he gets careless. Later that night, outside the fair, Carmen asks Yu if he managed to find the light he was searching so hard for. To which Yu says yes, but only briefly. Instead of giving him answers, it just left him with more questions. So he'll keep boxing while he looks for an answer. Carmen tells her love interest that maybe it's just a matter of focus. Instead of looking for that light in boxing, he looked for it in another kind of place or person. It might even be right next to him. And as the fireworks light up the night sky, a mysterious woman approaches our lovely couple. The young woman is actually Yulia, the Santorino's younger sister, and if she came to bother them at this hour, it's because her brother asked her to deliver a message. He needs Carmen to go to the written location at midnight. The MC asks his beloved what happened. However, since it's nothing to worry about, Carmen thanks you for such a fun day. But it seems they should just be friends. Our MC tells his beloved that she's mistaken because he'd actually like to have another date with her. The only problem our lovebirds didn't know about was that Marco Santorino was watching them very closely. The days passed quickly. You and Carmen were getting closer and closer. And while he was investigating the Santorino's whereabouts, the MC's performance was getting worse day by day. Kay is fed up with such a mediocre performance, so he ends the training session and asks him to tell Carmen to visit him. And so, inside the boss's office, Kay reminds his employee that her job is to take care of you. If at any point she started to develop feelings for him, then the best thing would be for her to stop being by his side. His decision was carried out immediately, so Patrick will be Yu's new protector. Parallel to this, the moment Carmen returns to her apartment, someone was already waiting for her. Yesterday, at around 8 p.m., Carmen was brutally assaulted in her apartment and was found unconscious. A few hours later, Kay tells his pupil that the Santorinos must have discovered their relationship. If he had known that something like this could have happened, he would have posted more guards to protect her. He just asks Yu to try and focus on his training. He will take matters into his own hands. The best revenge they can get is inside the ring. And during the press conference, Kay gets straight to the point and tells the brothers that they will regret the day they messed with his manager. But with a huge smile, Marco says it's not that big of a deal. All they did was all play a little joke on her. Conference. Over the next few minutes, both trainers will state what expectations they have for their opponent. Marco confesses that he admires Kay a great deal. His thirst for victory is almost terrifying. It must have been a shame to see great sports geniuses pass through his hands, especially when Aaron Tite decided to dump him like the filthy trash he is. But now it seems he's found his perfect puppet, if the toy is as psychopathic as the puppeteer. They're two of a kind. However, the statement only makes Kay laugh. Apparently, their easy mother didn't know how to teach her bastards any manners. He may be an old sea dog, but he can still kick some son of a bitch's ass. Fabricio asks his brother to control himself. He will take revenge for the disrespect shown to their mother. The moment the bell rings, not even God will be able to stop him from killing his opponent. Although Yu has something to say about this, until now, our MC had always remained silent. He would occasionally give short answers during press conferences, but on this occasion, he has something very important to say. He doesn't plan on winning easily by a knockout, so for the next 12 rounds, he'll focus on torturing the wretch who dared to mess with his beloved. After the press conference, Marco tells his brother that his performance has improved since they started using anabolic substances. His power is unmatched by anyone from his weight class. Although if they want to destroy their victim, they might need to increase the dose a little more. The next day, during the night, Carmen has regained consciousness just in time for the title fight. In just 3 years since his debut, Fabricio managed to division his mere presence generated hatred in the hearts of the spectators. No one in the boxing world likes the champion. And it's all because after his first title defense, a special rule was applied to him when it was revealed that he used plaster inside his gloves and bribed the referee so no one would suspect anything. It was at that moment that Fabricio became the villain of boxing. Furthermore, this doesn't seem to be an exception to his bad habits because his body is so mutated that it doesn't look natural. Kate, for starting, for the first time he won't ask him to do anything special, so he has the freedom to do whatever he wants until he's satisfied. The fight between the strongest contender champion Masville is about to drastically improve Fabricio's physical condition, but his brother knows that's not enough to win. His rival has the upper hand in terms of dexterity and skills, but they must remember he's also human. So playing mind games would be the first step to break his concentration, although that was only part one of the plan. Fabricio a challenger because if he dodges his sharp reflexes, for a brief moment, a blind spot will be exposed. However, the champion didn't calculate one small detail. He never imagined that Yu would read his shadow's movement, so now it's his turn to get revenge with a single punch. And this is because Yu's body also underwent a mutation. Kay told the Santorinos they would regret it, so he decided to contact an old friend and get his hands on military-grade chemicals because, as the saying goes, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and evil Theo may have taken a lot of damage, but he orders the referee to stop the count. Marco knows his brother is in great danger. That punch that sent him flying missed it on purpose. Yu hit him slightly above his guard. Apparently, he will fulfill his promise in the most slow and painful way possible. But before we continue, let's understand what happened first. Carmen was indeed kidnapped by Fabricio, which brings back the demons of her past. When she was young, her father was an important diplomat, and to punish him, his entire family was kidnapped to send a message. After Carmen's parents were killed, She went into a state of shock from the terror of the situation. When a person suffers extreme stress, the brain shuts down as a survival mechanism. That little girl sitting in the darkness had lost all hope until one day a man tried to talk to her. Kay was Carmen's savior, and not only that, after the rescue, he kept sending her money to keep her safe. For that same reason, when Carmen became an adult, she decided to go visit him. Although for some reason he had become someone different, Carmen knows that in a situation like this, staying calm is paramount. Her body seems to be in good condition. She hasn't been tortured in any way, so everything will probably be fine, only for Marco to kindly greet guests seconds later. Unfortunately, they had to resort to force. If she had accepted the invitation from the beginning, things would be completely different, but they need an honest opinion about you, because while he may be a boxing prodigy, doesn't he deserve a life full of excitement that he can enjoy? Someone who knows the first thing about boxing knows what kind of person Kay is and why his students leave him. As long as you continues under the tutelage of that man, he will never be happy. For that reason, if they want the protagonist to be free, he just needs to lose one fight. That way, Kay will lose the interest in him. Carmen knows that might work, but she still wants to believe in the man who saved her, even if it means he might fail along the way. So she doesn't plan on telling Marco Santorino anything. Back at the hospital, Patrick is relieved that his friend has regained consciousness. However, everything is about to be revealed much soon. It turns out Marco isn't as bad of a guy as he seems, since despite not getting any answers from Carmen, he decides the best thing to do is to release her and take her home so she can be safe. Marco tells Carmen she shouldn't be impressed. They may have a bad reputation, but they still have lines they won't cross. They were just trying to get into their rival's head a bit. Patrick looks puzzled by his friend's story, but as she reveals more details, like the fact that when Marco dropped her off near her house, a group of thugs was waiting for her and jumped her to start beating her up, which is pretty ironic. She was supposed to be in charge of getting rid of anyone who would harm them, and the last time she worked, no one was a threat. And so, as Carmen confesses everything to Patrick, Fabricio doesn't seem to be having a great time. The commentator Bob Norris, having once been Kay's boxer, knows that no one can compare to him in terms of dirty tricks. To that old man, this fight is a show where he enjoys watching his victims get beaten at their own game and the mastermind who planned this whole circus from the start was that man who gave up being a hero just to become a sadistic and heartless beast. Patrick asks his friend what her next move is. She could go to the police or reveal everything in a press conference. But none of that will help in the end. Kay is someone who knows no limits and will do anything to get what he wants. Or has he forgotten how many people he killed in the army for that demon? Murder is just a means to an end. And as much as she hates to admit it, Carmen knows the man she once considered a friend is right. Fabricio tries to hold on since he and his brother have a plan for a scenario just like this. If the chemicals they used aren't enough of an advantage, then they'll fall back on strategy. Since Yu declared that he's going to punish him for the entire fight, that means they have a full 12 rounds to gain ground. By using the clinch, which consists of holding the opponent as a defensive move, the plan is to land a dirty shot as the referee breaks them up. In practice, this might not work, since it leaves you open to a knockout, but since Yu isn't planning for a quick win, that means Fabricio can go all in on the offensive, opponent's speed, and while he continues to take a flurry of blows, the protagonist can't get the thought out of his head that the kindest woman in this filthy world was brutally assaulted by this idiot. He's going to hurt him so much that he'll leave him in a condition even more critical than Carmen's. Kay acknowledges that the Santorinos had a good plan in mind, but no matter how hard they rack their brains for a plan, all their efforts will be burned to ash before a superhuman power caring about fighting fair the moment the fight began. And ironically, the referee turned a blind eye to such a foul. It all points to him being bribed by that scumbag Kay. Marco underestimated his opponents. He thought Kay was just an extremely proud old man. He never imagined boxing was just a means to crush someone. In fact, Kay is happy that the Santorinos have grasped the situation. For a long time, they thought they were the only predators, but in reality, they're nothing more than mere wild dogs compared to the apex predator, the one who rules the food chain. And as the punishment continues, Fabricio begins to lose consciousness from all the hits, because as soon as the bell rings to end the first round, the champion had thrown up everything in his stomach. Marco looks worried for his younger brother, but in truth, he isn't the only one. Inside a Catholic church, a mother begs her lord to please bring her sons home safe and sound. Marco quickly enters the ring, just to help his brother before he passes out. Fabrizio's face is paler than a ghost's, but he still says there's nothing to worry about. It turns out that before the fight, Mama Santorino asked her son multiple times to drink some milk. And although this could be heavy on his stomach before a fight, Fabrizio decided to drink the whole bottle of milk just to keep their mother happy. Perhaps the champion has always shown a winning attitude, but their mother has a maternal instinct. Something tells her the fight will be very dangerous, so she implores her sons that if things get worse, please, they have to throw in the towel if they think they can't win. And while the damage the champion suffered is considerable, Marco notices something particular about his brother's lips. All of a sudden, they've taken on a purple hue. But, of course, Cass was a maniac and many other things. But would he really dare to go that far? Unfortunately for the Santorinos, they're the smartest tool in the shed. In fact, Marco realized this from a very young age. The first thing was that his brothers had different hair colors than he did. And the second was that they lived in a humble house. Marco's father left them with a debt before running off like a coward, so expenses like the rent were a constant concern. Marco and Fabrizio would leave for school every morning. Or so their mother thought, because the two rascals never actually went to class. Instead, they'd look for lost tourists, and while they were helping them with directions, on their maps, they'd always end up stealing their wallets or something of equal value. This way, they could scrape together some money for their home, since, as usual, their mother didn't have money for rent, and it always bothered them to see her have to humiliate herself by having to offer certain unconventional services so the landlord would leave them alone for a while. The brothers knew their mother worked her fingers to the bone, day and night, that they had to resort to desperate measures in search of a better life. The problem is, the world is just as cruel to everyone. Because the next day, while the boys were pulling their usual heists, a neighborhood thug caught them in the act, taught them a valuable lesson, and dragged them home. Mama Santorino tried to defend her sons, but the thug told them that this is what happens when you steal from people, and while they paid half their due by handing over all the money, debt to society was still so large that a different kind of service was required to pay it off. And so, after a long day, Mama Santorino begins to punish her sons. She didn't raise a couple of thieves. Do you want to grow up and become bad people? In truth, the brothers knew what they were doing was wrong, but seeing the woman they love come home beaten and broken every night, is that fair? Is taking out your bitterness on your wife something a man should do, only to then abandon his entire family and take no responsibility for his debts? Is that fair? The world is a bleak and gloomy place where sometimes you have to become a bad person. The boy's mother, realizing she had gone too far with the punishment, doesn't take long to apologize. If she weren't so foolish, they would have a different life. Marco understood that day that if the world was going to be this unfair to them, then he would find a way to get his revenge. The next day, Marco came up with a revolutionary idea. If he becomes the world boxing champion, they'll be millionaires. That way they won't want for anything anymore. But first, he has to take care of some unfinished business. While Fabrizio tried to go to school so he wouldn't grow up ignorant, Marco spent his days staking out his future victim and building something that would soon come in handy. Until finally, Fabrizio felt his brother get out of bed, so he went to find him and confront him. Marco tells his brother that he's going to get revenge on the jerk who beat them up. Their mother asked them to be good people, but it seems the world needs bad people in it. That is why Marco will become a parasite on society, so that his family have a better life. So he orders his little brother to stay and watch the house. The moment of truth has arrived. When the bully bent down to pick up the large bill, Marco takes advantage of the situation to land the first punch. His strength might come out, but in reality, this is just the first step of his plan, because as the thug starts chasing the boy, he quickly activates each of his traps, and the bully falls for them one by one to chance at close range. So he designed the entire alley with multiple traps. This way, his victim should go down before reaching him. But what the young man didn't count on was the bully's endurance, which surpassed his calculations. So he had no choice but to use his last resort, although, unfortunately for Marco, the bully surpasses him in terms of experience. Just when the boy was about to be sent to the next life, Fabrizio arrived, in the nick of time to save him. The brothers sadistically beat the imbecile, thinking that it was his damn fault they couldn't have the life they longed for. So after getting their revenge and stealing what little he had in his pockets, This wasn't enough for Marco if they wanted no one else to get in their way. Then they would have to make an example of him. Fabricio confesses to his brother that he came to help because school really isn't his thing. To which Marco replies that if that's the case, they should become boxers. When they become world champions, no one will look down on their family. The next day, the bully was found paralyzed from the waist down, while on the other hand, the boys went to give some meat to their mom, a luxury they hadn't had in a long time. Mama Santorino prepared a delicious meatloaf. And while it tasted terrible, the fact that the family was happy for the first time was more than enough for the pair of brothers. Time passed. The Santorino family used to attend Mass every Sunday, a place Marco found beautiful because only there did he feel that they lacked nothing. During that time, the brothers looked for boxing gyms. Although they were rejected by every single one, everyone believed they were just a couple of good-for-nothing brats. However, someone didn't quite agree. This drunken old man is known as Luciano Mondi, who, despite looking like a parasite on society, is actually skilled and cunning. So much so that he tells the brothers he knows their sin, and just when the brothers were thinking of eliminating loose ends, Mondi tells them not to misunderstand him. He is only interested in the potential they have because he will become their new coach. So after a few bottles, Mondi orders the brothers to fight, as this is the only way he'll know their strengths and weaknesses. Fabricio is tough despite his age, and even though the size difference is significant, he knows how to manage to land a good punch. On the other hand, Marco was born with a great intellect, which allows him to accurately predict his opponent's movements. Both have good qualities to be a champion, but in the future, Fabricio will be the one to go further. Any great boxer requires strong conviction, as well as a dream to motivate them on the worst days. For that reason, if they have no other alternative, they must become obsessed with their future in order to achieve their goals. And so, time passed. The boys began to train their strengths, and as the years went by, they began to turn into great boxers, finally becoming the adults they aspired to be. Santorinos went in search of Marco's father to get revenge, and despite giving his father a good beating, Marco points out that he paid off the family debts a long time ago. In fact, the reason for their visit is different. He needs him to give all his belongings to his former wife, or else the boys will make him have a bad time. And even though their father was forced to settle his debt, the Santorinos have to set an example and shut him up for good. Marco and Fabricio became the kings of the underworld, so much so that they had stopped seeing their master for a time. However, with the Christmas season just around the corner, the boys invite Mondi to spend the 24th and 25th with family because even though he might not be their biological father, he raised them as if he truly were. Now on Christmas Eve, Mondi got dressed up for the first time in a long while, and he did it, since he wanted to make a good impression on Mama Santorino. And so, during dinner, Julia is intrigued by Mondi's appearance because his red nose and disheveled style make him look just like Santa Claus himself, a detail that Mama Santorino doesn't overlook, since she was also thinking the same thing as her daughter. And so, after Mondi turned red as a tomato, the Santorino family had the most beautiful Christmas of their lives. Everyone looked happy. The food was delicious. The atmosphere was so serene that all you could hear was laughter and joy. Later, after dinner, the Santorinos suggest to their mentor that he should visit them for Christmas more often, or if he wanted, he could live with them full time. But, however, despite such a wonderful evening, he has to refuse the offer. He belongs to the streets and that's where he'll stay. The only thing the poor old man wants is to see his boys become real boxers. Right now, they have no rival, but as soon as they go out into the world, they'll meet men who will seem like beasts. Besides, if they continue with their shady business, sooner or later a stronger group will come along and take them out. But, however, this doesn't seem to matter to the boys, because while their mentor shows a worried expression, they only want to spend happy moments by his side, and doing something they never could as kids. The Santorinos had a snowball fight with their old man. The world already looked like a sweet and pure place, just like the snow. Marco confesses to Mondi that they never gave up on their dream of being champions, but right now their town needs them even more. If someone doesn't take out the trash, the world will never change. Mondi accepts that he can't change the opinion of his boys, so he just tells them that no matter what, he will always support them. Though what the poor mentor wasn't counting on was that tragedy was about to strike. They were chatting about the evening, blood began to appear in the milk. Back in the execution proceeds as planned, and while this happens, Mama Santorino has another one of her episodes. Fabrizio knows his mother's condition isn't good. He needs to win as many times as necessary to pay for her treatment, so it doesn't matter how tough his opponent is. Mom didn't raise any cowards, so he could do this all day. The ring is bathed in blood. This fight should have ended a long time ago, but it seems the World Boxing Council was bought off. Round 4 came to a close, so Marco tells his brother that they have to give up. What do titles matter if he can keep his life? But Fabrizio disagrees with his brother. They both knew very well that this scenario would eventually catch up with them. So for the honor of all his loved ones, he refuses to let them down, and doing something as humiliating as surrendering is likely the end for him, but he still has to try for that stupid old man. Mondium's crew went looking for the girls to attack them, but thank God their mentor was able to do something about it. Although unfortunately he didn't escape the fight unscathed. The brothers try to rush to get help, but their mentor asks them not to make a scene. It's already too late. Everyone dies eventually. And for him, today is that day. However, he needs them to listen to him one last time. Frankly, both of you would fit in much better as gangsters than as boxers. You could even become the most notorious criminals in history. Still, that's a path you should never walk down. The last wish of this poor old man is for you to become boxers. The road won't be glamorous at first. Furthermore, you will face rivals so talented that you'll never surpass. And just when you think you've reached the peak of your strength, opponents will come along who unfortunately will easily surpass you. Though this is nothing more than the cycle of life. Life is an irrational game where not everyone is destined to win. No one stays strong forever. Sometimes there will be moments of happiness, but everyone must struggle daily before they die. Mondi was an acclaimed boxer in his time, but due to his lifestyle and bad decisions, he started down a path of evil until his sins were atoned for with the death of his family. From that moment on, he felt his life had lost all meaning. Besides, life would have many more obstacles ahead. Mama Santorino suffered a brain hemorrhage and the risk of it returning is ever present. Mondi doesn't know if his life had any meaning, if that miserable boxing he taught them served any purpose. This poor bag of bones is sure of one thing. Those kids he met several years ago brought back the joy that he once lost and thought he would never recover. That's why even though he's not by their side, their father will be with them throughout their entire journey. But the tragedy didn't end there, because what seemed like a simple dizzy spell turned out to be the old illness that had returned. Marco begs his brother to please pull out of the fight, but Fabrizio, that stubborn man, can't do it, since if he does, he'll feel that he will have lived in vain. Marco perfectly understands Fabrizio's feelings, but if he feels his life is at risk, he won't hesitate to throw in the towel. Because of his family's dreams. He swore to his brother that together they would put an end to the evil and bring a wonderful future to their home. So he doesn't care about giving up his life in this fight, if it means fulfilling his purpose. The rounds continued. The rounds to pass. And Fabrizio began to question his own existence. Is life about coming into this world just to suffer? It's sad that people struggle to survive their entire lives only for, after a long history filled with suffering, one to cease to exist. The final round has arrived. The champion's face is completely destroyed. So Marco doesn't think twice and goes to throw in the towel. However, they won't let him. The World Council wants the match to reach its conclusion. Marco can't believe this wasn't planned as a fight, but that from the very beginning it was considered an execution. So he begs his brother to get the hell out of there right now. But it's already too late. As Yu unleashes the most brutal massacre in boxing, Fabrizio tries to stay conscious. Hasn't he taken enough punishment? But if God decided this is how his life would end, then he won't go out like a coward for his loved ones, for their late father. Fabrizio won't run or hide from a monster, so any bastard can come at him with everything they've got. As the fight reached its final seconds, Fabrizio is ready to pay for his family's sins, but if his lord is benevolent, please, for the first time in his life, could you forgive him for just this one time? The outcome was decided in the last second before the bell rang. A miracle left everyone present in the arena stunned because they had just witnessed something that had never been seen before. Jay tells the young kid from back then that he's become very strong, and as the fight reached its conclusion, Mama Santorino came out of her surgery alive. The protagonist doesn't understand what's happening, why that man is standing in front of him. The crowd begins to cheer for the uncrowned king of boxing, the one beloved by all fans of the sport. Jay tells Yu that it's been a long time, though their next encounter will be an official one. And as the people's champion withdraws, Kay tells the Kaiser champion he's a miserable bastard. Someday he'll put an end to his pathetic existence. However, that doesn't matter at this moment. Fabricio needs medical attention, urgently. The hours passed by uneventfully. Peter is contemplating what to write about the new middleweight champion. It was previously believed that his weakness was his endurance, but every time he fights, he gives the impression of being a perfect being. But if I had to do a more thorough analysis, you could say he's slowly losing his humanity. Moreover, with Jay's unexpected return to the boxing world, there are many questions to be answered, but the most important one is whether the World Council will actually arrange a fight between them. In fact, Peter is not the only one. Thinks that way. San Pierre, seeing a completely out-of-control Yu, just hopes someone will help him get out of the hell he's living in. On the other hand, Yudo Takeda, who has started a family, thinks that if Yu once had Yamaguchi's gaze, his eyes now look even more, plunged into an even deeper darkness. Meanwhile, his best friend Jay feels that something is very wrong behind all this. However, he can't do anything about it, because if he wins his next fight, he'll get a shot at the champion for the world title. Parallel to this, in a hospital room, Fabricio has regained consciousness and is grateful to still be alive. It's then that after hearing how Marco apologizes to his brother for getting him into this mess, but Fabricio tells him that thanks to him, they are finally free from guilt. Haven't they suffered enough in this life? Maybe this is the perfect time to leave the past behind and make a new start, just as their mother would have wanted. A life where you fight to survive with everything you have until you fall. Perhaps that's how most people would spend their time. If you have someone who accepts you from the bottom of your heart, then that is more than enough to accept the genuine meaning of life. Meanwhile, in some unsanitary place, the protagonist's bloodlust was so shocking that Andrei Blashenko thinks Yu could end his champion's tyranny. A few days have passed since the world title fight. Yu is more depressed than usual, even though the media considers him the town fighter of the era and he has become the highest paid boxer. All the commotion seems like noise to Yu. Besides, the protagonist is only interested in knowing when Carmen will return, but unfortunately Kay tells his pupil that she quit. It's not surprising she made that decision when her life was in danger. They might have gotten very close in recent weeks, so it's a shame their story had this tragic ending. Kay tells Yu to take a few days off. His last match must have exhausted him physically and psychologically. And so, during his walk back home, our protagonist asked himself a question the entire way. In a world full of chaos where politicians don't keep their promises, war claims the lives of innocent people, and you're just waiting to find out when the day will come that you lose the most important person in your life. Yu wondered. What is life ever since? He can remember. He has only suffered abuse. His mother seemed to have no interest in him, and his father was nothing more than a psychopath who took pleasure in hurting him. So much to think about created an uncontrollable noise in Yu's mind. And perhaps the ideal thing would be to silence it once and for all, though it's still too early for that because there are still some reasons to live. That gentle meow from a cat managed to quiet the noise inside Yu once more. But the night isn't the same for everyone. As Aaron Tite is staring at the stars, he's thinking so much about, to which Aaron replies that it's one of those days where he wonders if he even deserves such a happy life. His wife tells him that for such a big guy, he's quite a scaredy cat on the inside. Whatever obstacle comes his way, he has no reason to hesitate because his family will always support him in overcoming any adversity. Months passed since then, and now Yu's punches are more formidable. Kay feels satisfied with his fighter's new performance, as the real challenge of his career is about to begin. From now on, they will train with the goal of defeating Aaron Tite. So if they want to have even the slightest chance, they'll have to strengthen his physique to a completely different level. Our protagonist forged his path through the heavyweight divisions. None of the opponents he faced stood a chance. They were less than 2 seconds. Such was Yu's supremacy that he simply became invincible. Peter is worried about the future of boxing. Yu's absolute dominance is killing the fun part of watching it. So, if his goal is to face the sport's greatest exponent, first, he'll have to defeat the cruiserweight champion Viktor Grigorievich. And yes, folks, after so much sadness and pain, this will be the only comedic arc in the entire series, since that's how the author originally planned it, because just when Andrei Blashenko wanted his champion to face Yu so that he could get a beating, Viktor suddenly showed up to startle his coach, who wondered what was so funny. Andrei tells Viktor that man is the only one capable of giving him a real fight. However, Victor disagrees with his coach because no one without a mohawk is stronger than him. And to prove he's right, Victor goes straight to his crew to reaffirm that mohawks are the best thing that can possibly exist. In this life, Victor's reputation is so unconventional that Peter decides to send an intern named Tommy Muir to interview him. After all, the champion's gym is quite a curious place, because as Tommy ventures deeper, he finds it very peculiar that everyone has a mohawk. So when the intern meets Andre, he asks the coach what he thinks about his champion. Andre immediately puts on a very angry face toward Victor because his mere existence is an insult to the sport. It turned out that 8 years ago, Andrei Blakenko was looking to train a champion with a style very similar to Jean-Pierre's, so he always taught his pupils with a science-oriented training approach. But everything changed when that wretch entered his life. It was a day like the other when Andre was giving lessons, and a large guy started to brutally hit a punching bag. That's why Andre went to praise his punch, but Victor replies that that's nothing. A real man really hits like this. The coach was stunned by what he saw that day. That guy, who is a parody of Schwarzenegger, will become the champion who will lead him to greatness. Although, who would have thought that this dream was further from reality than anything else, because Victor was an untamable beast. He only believed that those with mohawks are the strongest, and every time he had to learn the basics of boxing, he always replied that those are sissy punches. A true silverback alpha wolf, with balls of vibranium and the crest of a mungosaurus, only throws haymakers without thinking. Therefore, since they weren't going to reach an agreement, Andre makes a proposal to Victor. If he manages to become champion, he will do anything he desires. It was then, in Victor's professional debut, that the Monitor was taking a beating. Nevertheless, a real man never gives up, and as if it were a cruel joke of fate, Victor's opponent, after slipping in the ring, was left completely exposed to Grigorievich's mighty right hook. The victory was a total fluke by all accounts, so Andre thought that such luck would run out sooner or later. Although, to his misfortune, the same story repeated itself over and over again. The slip in every fight was like an omen, like a joke from God telling Andre that he's an idiot. Victor Grigorievich came to boxing to dominate it with an iron fist until he finally became #1 in the division and earned the right to face the champion, Gilbert Einstein. The crowd chants the anthem to the Mohawk in praise of Victor. So much so that the Monitor got so confident that he tells his coach he hopes he hasn't forgotten their bet, because as soon as he becomes champion, he'll have to get a mohawk just like him. The fight is moments away from starting, where a younger Martinoli and Bob Norris will be the commentators. Bob, after giving up his middleweight championship title and becoming a commentator, points out that it's funny that Victor has managed to get this far on pure luck. But Einstein is a man governed by science and doesn't believe in coincidences, and just as the bell rings, Gilbert goes all out from the start. Taking the advantage during the first few seconds of the match, Andre stops supporting his fighter. As soon as the bell rang, he desperately wants him to lose so he doesn't have to cut his hair. Victor went to the canvas, and although everyone thought he wouldn't recover, the power of the Mohawk brings him back to life. However, the beating lasted for all 12 rounds. Victor is on his last legs. Victor. His entire career was thanks to a stroke of luck, which Gilbert knows perfectly well. So as long as he keeps his distance, that one attack he has, Victor will never land. Therefore, already decided, Victor is sent to the canvas once again. Everyone thought that would be the end of the Mohawk-wearing giant. But just like in a sports movie, Victor began to remember his past. Since he was little, he was a child loved by his parents, and as he became a man, he got super jacked. Then he found the love of his life. But because he was an idiot, they ended up sending him to flip burgers. So with all the rage inside his body, he discovered the most lethal punch in his arsenal. Maybe nothing I told you, my son, makes sense. But by the bleep power of the Mohawk, Victor is told to smash everything that guy calls a face. Then, just as the fight was about to end, the power of love, friendship, and Mohawks aligned as one, causing Gilbert to the match, and therefore, it means that Victor Grigorievic became the cruiserweight world champion. That is the tragic story of Andre, and the reason he's so afraid of Victor isn't his strength, but the stupid supernatural luck he possesses. Tommy is surprised by what he has just heard. It's the coolest story he's ever been told. And while Andre believes he has no chance against you, an unexpected guest enters the room. Victor tells the young man that if he's come to interview him about his training for his next fight, then he might as well tag along for the experience. The guys are about to go on the most fantastic adventure of their lives. Victor told himself one day that he wanted to become the strongest creature on Earth. So his goal is to find and defeat the strongest beings. Fighting a wild boar. Easy. Trading blows with a bull. A piece of cake. fighting a kangaroo with bare fists. Please, being the first to face a gorilla out of 100 men. Too easy. Victor defeated every beast that crossed his path until one day he had a premonition. The dinosaurs were the most powerful creatures on the planet, but they still went extinct due to a natural disaster. So the answer is quite obvious. If Victor wants to become the strongest, then he will have to contain the forces of nature within his fist. A foolproof plan. To be honest, if we have to climb Mount Everest, well, mountain punch unlocked. Now we have to fight a tornado. Well, tornado punch unlocked. Fight against an erupting volcano, magma punch unlocked. Risking your life on a boat instead of a 33-foot high tsunami. Tsunami punch was steadily taming Mother Nature. Lightning punch unlocked. While Victor became the supreme lord and master of nature, the gods sent an omen to the protagonist. The future was about to repeat itself. Yu's luck went from bad to worse. First with some things like his shoelaces breaking. But as soon as a gym lamp nearly killed him, Kei's right-hand man tells him they have to do something about it. It's as if Victor radiates bad luck onto his opponents. However, Kei says they don't have to do anything. There are things in this world that will happen as they are meant to, and losing is not one of them. Meanwhile, on Victor's side, the lunatic needs to gain more power if he wants to be the victor, so he unlocks War Machine Punch. Victor was so powerful that there was only one last punch left to learn. Holy water will protect its bearer from evil. And so, after bathing Victor's fist in the power of Jesus Christ, the Papal Punch was unlocked. The day we had all been waiting for arrived. The sovereign who has ruled over all divisions will face the luckiest champion in history. Victor tells his coach that his soul is screaming after all the intense training he did. It's as if he holds the power of the universe within his fist. Therefore, with the Nyx fist of justice, he will punish anyone who dares to face him. The crowd clearly has its favorite. Everyone wants the power of the Mohawk to be the victor. Before us is what could possibly be the fight of the century, and as soon as the bell rang, fate once again played its hand. Perhaps the probability of Yu slipping is almost zero, or the chance of its flaring up at the same time and obstructing his view is minimal, and the probability of him getting a shoulder cramp that prevents him from putting up his guard is extremely low. The chance of all these scenarios happening at once is so low that it's beyond imagination, but that doesn't mean it's 0% Victor Grigorievich, the man blessed by the gods who has managed to escape ridiculously lethal scenarios alive, has landed a direct hit on our protagonist, knocking him out on the canvas. And, in such an anticlimactic fashion, Victor Grigoriev becomes the winner of the match, and with that, we conclude the story of the boxer, because now the story will be called The Mohawk. After the shocking match, Victor became the strongest boxer in history. So forget anyone else who was mentioned, because this is now Victor's story. His popularity and power surpassed human limits. So one day, some mysterious men paid him a visit, as America required his presence. They needed a president fit for the job. The world currently has many problems to solve, so the United States needs someone who can take on the role. And even though Victor is technically Russian, that's no obstacle because with a stunning electoral campaign, Victor beats his rival, the Lightning Squirrel, in the polls and manages to become the new president. The world watches, anxious about the future that awaits. However, Victor came to an irrefutable conclusion. His first decree as the new president is that any dispute between countries must be settled in a martial arts tournament. And if anyone opposes this alternative, perhaps nuclear war is the best option. World's governments, having no other choice, decide to accept Victor's demand, and thus, the King of Iron Fist tournament was held. Victor defeated the strongest fighters on the planet for the first time in history. The world was successfully unified by the Fist of Peace. Victor Grigorievich thus became the president of the world. That's why, in support of his great presidency, everyone must now sport a mohawk. Planet Earth became Planet Mohawk. But the peace didn't last long, as aliens desired to take control of Earth. That's why the great Mohawked hero went in a rocket ship to crush the filthy aliens. Ugh, I'm tired of all this nonsense. Victor was dreaming this entire story after he was knocked out, so let's see what really happened. When Yu lost his balance for a second, he remembered the special move of Bayonet. So he quickly sent Victor to Dreamland with a punch so powerful it rearranged everything he calls a face. He became the Cruiserweight World Champion after 1.1 seconds of the fight starting, causing Andre to smile once again in the process. Only for Victor to regain consciousness a few minutes later, he's even surprised that he actually lost. To which Andre replies that it was obvious. Did he really think all his special training was going to pay off? Victor admits that maybe he was mistaken, but it was a fun ride, wasn't it? Andre cracks a slight smile at his friend because, to be honest, it was a pretty fun adventure. Besides, since the Russian isn't an envious guy, he wants to congratulate the new champion on his performance. Although the Russian can see something in Yu's eyes, ever since he saw him on TV the other day, he noticed something. In particular, if you really don't like boxing, you don't have to do it. Kay immediately jumps into the conversation and tells Victor that losers don't have any reason to be in the ring. Peter is amazed by the outcome. This result makes 4 victories for you. All the champions who were at the top of their class have been defeated. And while some might consider Victor a clown, Peter explains that it's the opposite. The secret behind Victor was his incredible physical endurance. Andre, knowing Victor wouldn't listen to him otherwise, decided to focus his training solely on strength, brute force, so he could withstand any type of punch thrown at him. He was so strong that he would have even had a match against Aaron Tight if he had won this fight. The fight the fans have been waiting for will finally happen. Soon it will be revealed which of the 2 monsters is number 1. The dream of Kay is about to come true. However, Aaron watched the whole show from the stands, so he decides to call his agent to hold a press conference. The only thing the champion cares about in this life is the unconditional love his girls give him when he gets home. Therefore, in front of the eyes of the world, Aaron Tight announces his retirement from the world of boxing. Today will be his last day as a professional. He doesn't plan to play that old devil's game. The reporters ask the champion for the reason behind his decision, which Aaron replies in a cold voice that he doesn't have the slightest interest in the fight. He flatly refuses to play that psychopath's game. Kay looks pleased by his former protege's declaration. He may seem stoic right now, but every human has a weakness. Whether he wants or not, they will have their match very soon. Understand the problem between these 2. Let's go back many years into the past, specifically to when the commentator Bob Norris had become champion, who after some bad experiences with Kay decided to hang up his gloves. And even though Kay asks him the real reason for his retirement, Bob simply says it's all useless because a short time later, Cole found another champion we'll come to know as Jason, an extremely violent being who would obliterate his opponents. However, he wasn't enough for Coach K. He was looking for someone who didn't just have talent. He was looking for someone who had something that couldn't be replicated. Maybe Bob and Jason would go down in the history books, but the coach's vision was clear. He wouldn't rest until he found someone who wasn't human. So, as the coach scouted the gyms, one day on his way home, fate would bring him together with the being who would end up becoming what he so longed for. Kay was intrigued. The driver had an extraordinary physique, but for some reason, he preferred a low-paying job instead of fame and fortune. However, since the road was blocked by traffic, Aaron decided to take a shortcut to save some time. However, a few yards ahead, Aaron asks Kay to excuse him for what he is about to do, but he needs him to call the police, urgently. Although Kay wants a front row seat to what's about to happen, Aaron tells the thug to let go of his future wife. But since the parasite of society hates taking orders, he tells the big guy he'd better back off or he'll end his life. The thief doesn't understand what's happening. His knife just got stuck in the man's body. Kay can't believe what he just witnessed. His driver contracted all of his muscles the moment he was stabbed. In fact, this was what he had been looking for. In front of him was a being that gave him goosebumps. Aaron tells the thief he's sorry he didn't listen when he had the chance, because unfortunately, he will have to feel his power, and unfortunately for the thief, he hasn't learned to control his strength. The sound was unmistakable. The guy's skull had been pulverized against the concrete. Kay was amazed because the wait had been worth it. The man who was his driver had just ended another's life with a single blow. He had finally found the monster who would dominate boxing. Aaron apologizes to his client for the trouble. Soon, the company will send another driver to help him. Kay tells him that if he wants his help, he'd better take the gloves because without it, he'll be in serious trouble. In spite of acting in self-defense to save a civilian, such a massacre could be considered excessive use of force, so Kay will help him so that he doesn't go to prison. If there are aggravating circumstances where a civilian was critically injured, the law can be more flexible about what might happen to the aggressor. Aaron asks the old man if he's gone crazy, but with a mischievous laugh, Kay asks the champion if he has ever wondered about the reason for his existence. Surely someone as big and strong as him must have faced young, but if he wants to get what he wants, the answers he needs, he has to go with him for an old-timer to provide them. The police didn't take long to arrive at the crime scene, but from the little information they could gather, It's incredible that one man caused so much damage with his fists. So the judge decided to rule Aaron innocent. At a crime scene with multiple victims, the tragedy would have escalated if the attacker hadn't been stopped. The time passed since then. Now at Leon's gym, the number 2 ranked heavyweight had been knocked out. Aaron T managed to beat him, easily in his first time ever wearing gloves. Kay is anxious to see his true strength, but he needs a punching bag that can put up more of a fight. And, luckily for him, the solution arrived almost instantly. His former pupil, the current champion Jason, heard that his coach had brought a new toy to the gym, so he wants to get revenge for being replaced without any warning. Kay tells Jason that an uncontrolled weapon is useless, but if he manages to defeat the guy in the ring, he will personally turn him into the greatest boxer in history. Jason seems to like the idea. After all, how could a nobody possibly beat someone with more experience in the sport Jason managed to become a champion in 4 weight classes, and it was all thanks to the fear he instilled in his victims. Power, speed, defense, and technique. He had reached the pinnacle in every human attribute. When the bell rang for what was supposed to be a simple sparring match, Jason decided to end the fight as quickly as possible, but as he landed more and more punches, his gym mates watched the scene in fear. The most terrifying champion was exhausted, since none of his punches had any effect. Before him stood a being who surpassed him in every way. Without realizing it, Jason had cornered himself, in the corner out of pure instinct. Because the aura his opponent projected was so intimidating that it only took one punch to the face for the champion to be sent to the hospital in critical condition. Kay told Aaron that the reason for his existence was to put others under his heel. From birth, he was destined to belong in the Hall of Fame. In other words, he was blessed to reach the pinnacle of human supremacy. Back in the present, just like every morning, Aaron gets up out of pure discipline, and even though he's technically retired and can rest, the habit he built over years compels him to exercise. As he goes on his usual run, he finds Yu training the same way. Here we see the two sides of the same coin. While one is adored by the people, the other continues his run without interruption. While Aaron can have a family dinner, he suffers through what will be the worst moment of his life. His little cat has stopped eating for the past few days, while the thing that matters most to the champion in this life is being able to keep the smile on his little daughter's face, which is all that matters. Although sometimes he wonders if he's worthy of so much joy. His wife, his best friend, tells him he is being a softie. He has no reason to worry about the past. Today, he's a charming husband and father. Because if he hadn't left that lunatic of a former coach behind, who knows what a vile and unfeeling monster he would have become. Kay is proud of what he has achieved with his fighter. Very soon, fate will cause the old friends to cross paths again. One day, in the middle of the night during a downpour, an old friend appears in front of Aaron T's house. Carmen has come seeking his help, as he's the only one who can help her. And from the devastating look on her face, she is quickly welcomed in by the entire family. Carmen can't keep hiding the lie and confesses the whole truth about Kay to the Thai family. However, no matter how much she wants to, she can't call the police. That man is so clever, he surely left no evidence behind. Although Carmen knows exactly how to beat that wretched man. A while ago, Marcos Santorino told her that if his fighter loses, Kay will lose all interest. And the only one who can pull off such a feat is Aaron. A few hours later, after Carmen leaves, Mrs. Thai asks her husband what he thinks. Aaron knows that if he agrees, he'll be falling right into his trap. In reality, the reason he left Kay was because Kay considered humanity a weakness that prevented him from being the best, but upon learning about knows firsthand what it feels like to be sunk in depression. He believes those two need someone who can help them, so he will become the one to defeat that psychopath's dictatorship. And so, shortly after retiring, Aaron Tight has a new announcement that shook the world of boxing. He has decided to return for his final show. Once he wins the heavyweight title against Yu, he will hang up his gloves again. For that reason, he needs all the help he can get. So he went to the only man who can train him. We'll know this elderly gentleman as Gus D'Amato, the second best coach in the world after Kay, who confesses to his fighter that he doesn't know if he can teach him what it takes to win. If he wants to achieve victory against Yu, then he must be willing to risk his life in the arena. Although Aaron isn't the only one who will get special training. The police received a report about a huge disturbance in the area, with the person responsible for the whole thing being our coach, who humbly asked the officer to come and see what's happening. The servant shows a perplexed look on his face at what he sees. The disturbance was caused by multiple cannonballs crashing against several walls. He asks for the officer's understanding, since his boxer is training to survive death, as the fists he is about to face are stronger and faster than any cannonball. In fact, Peter Ken is surprised by Aaron's training. His partner is using a bomb suit. Diamato tells Kent that it's necessary. Aaron's punches are so lethal that without that suit, anyone who faces him would end up 6 feet under. The weeks passed slowly. As each training session continued, the most important fight in boxing history drew closer. However, as time went on, just a few days before the fight, our beloved feline friend started coughing up blood. The protag looked more depressed than usual because something inside him knew that something bad was about to happen. The Hachia veterinarian explained that his friend was about 100 human years old, and if he had lived this long, it was because he wished to stay by his side, but unfortunately, he must prepare for the farewell. The match finally arrived. Aaron says goodbye to the love of his life before going to the stadium, but when they see each other again, Daddy will come back a winner. Parallel to this, on our protag's side, Kay tells him that this is the fight he has been training for since day one. His training has focused on dodging every punch because no matter how much he trains, no one is capable of withstanding the champion's heavy punches. If Aaron manages to land even a single punch, the title won't be the only thing he'll lose. He could also lose his life. Therefore, he must kill him before he gets killed. You understands what his coach is saying, but he has to make a request. The only thing that matters to him in this life is his cat. He's at home right now, so if he dies in the fight, he only asks that he take care of him. Kay promises you that he will fulfill his only wish, but it's time for the show to begin because the fight between the strongest pound-for-pound boxers is about to begin. Aaron looks furious with our protag. The soulless look in his eyes at this moment makes him think he doesn't care about spending the rest of his life as a monster. So, because of the promise he made to his friend, the champion will save that man from the void he's in. That hook that knocked out the champions of every weight class had, for the first time in its entire history, met an impenetrable wall. Aaron Tite is a man who is not of this world, and if you give him the slightest of openings, he can end the fight in the blink of. This match won't just be a fight to see who has more endurance. Diamato explains to his boxer that the scales will tip in favor of whoever maintains control over the ring. Both possess otherworldly physical abilities, but those eyes can see the world as if it's moving in slow motion. No one is capable of matching his speed and ingenuity, although the advantage he has over you is that he has an extremely durable body. Not even the challenger's punches can hurt him. So technically, they both have the same odds of winning. Make key element for to come out victorious will be to corner the opponent in the corners. The moment the protagonist gets cornered, this will be the perfect time for Aaron to land one of his punches. Although what the champion didn't count on was that Kay knew perfectly well he would resort to that strategy, so in order to ruin his plans, you voluntarily backed into the corner. No matter how hard they try to figure out his plans, Kay wants to make his superiority clear, because if they thought they'd beat them with their pathetic strategy, they were in for a big surprise when they saw they were wrong. Maybe Yu's counters didn't manage to push the champion back completely. In reality, Kay's true objective was to provoke him by showing him that even while at a disadvantage, Yu still hasn't shown his true strength. The atmosphere in the arena is starting to feel heavy because what the world is about to see is a death match between two monstrosities. Music. Neither fighter is willing to give an inch at the start of the fourth round. According to Diamato's vast experience, even though Aaron is eating all of Yu's punches, his body doesn't look tired at all. Besides, Yu hasn't been able to let his guard down for a moment, and he concentrate with his entire being if he wants to keep throwing those counters without getting hit. However, as the rounds have gone by, the gap between them is starting to narrow. The enormous pressure the champion maintains is so colossal that you must consider even the smallest detail of his movements, because those gloves carry a death sentence with every jab thrown. According to Gus, Yu's mental strength will soon collapse. So much so that he asked his fighter not to overdo it because if he goes too far, he could kill his opponent. A weakness that our coach knows perfectly, since it was that very same reason why he always considered Aaron an imperfect being. From the beginning, he should have accepted his reality. He is the personification of fear and victory. His destiny was to crush anyone who stood in his way to be crowned with the victory and fame he should have always had. A way of thinking that Peter shares. Since a few years ago, the heavyweight division was the fans' favorite category, as anyone in the rankings had the potential to be champion. But it wasn't until the arrival of Aaron Tite that everything changed. There were countless title contenders who wanted to face him, though unfortunately, They all suffered the same fate. They would soon realize that Aaron would never be dethroned from the top. However, when Peter interviewed him a few years ago and asked him what boxing is to him, Aaron replied that he still doesn't know. Simply a job that he's good at, and where they consider him a monster who is the best at crushing others. And so, in the past, the champion has broken the gap between them, because you miraculously dodged his lethal blow. This is the first time anyone has managed to land a real blow on him? In truth, as blood flows from the protagonist's ear, Aaron will do whatever it takes to free him from his chains. The round has come to an end, and although Aaron may seem to have the upper hand, the champion tells his trainer that this fight is far from over. It's impossible that lunatic doesn't have another ace up his sleeve. The 5th round has begun. Aaron is happy to have met someone like you in the ring. Possibly he is the only one who can understand him. They belong to a selfish sport, where you face all kinds of opponents, each with their own enthusiasm, discipline, and purpose. But it only takes one good punch to miserably crush everything they fought for. It's sad to see how someone with talent fades away before his eyes. So when this match ends, one of the two will lose the will to keep fighting. The world may consider them sports geniuses, but in reality, their talent is more of a curse. Aaron Tight begins to close the gap more and more between them, because with every punch he lands, Yu starts to bleed even more. But suddenly the champion froze in fear. Kay thinks that Aaron got overconfident. Did he really think his fighter would succumb to fear? He couldn't be more wrong. They set a trap for him from the beginning, because that void that he's trying to free him from is all he has. Even the strongest warrior in history has his limits. Kay knew perfectly well that the abdomen was the only muscle he hadn't perfected. From the beginning of this story, he has undergone intense training to demolish it, and finally the arduous work he has done for years is starting to pay off. No matter how hard he tries from now on, the champion won't be able to withstand the pain that he has never suffered in his life. If he thought he would find meaning in his existence through this fight, then he'll have to focus first on saving his own life. Because the monster in human form has come to claim his soul the moment the pain begins to take effect on the champion. It was at that precise moment that Aaron learned the true meaning of terror. It's explained to us that the reason he wasn't the best is because, ironically, that strength is his greatest weakness. Years ago, when he had his championship fight, the face of that crying, heartbroken woman because her husband was seriously injured. That scene reawakened his trauma. Kay asks his boxer why he didn't finish his opponent, and since Aaron replied that there was no point if he had already secured the victory, Kay understood something at that moment. That man lacked the instinctive fear that we all have. Human beings are naturally afraid of several things. For example, the fear of starving to death, fear of losing your social status, fear of being oppressed and controlled, and fear of losing life itself. Fear is a source of strength that pushes you forward. However, when a being understands that there is nothing that can harm it, that fearless creature casts aside the strength it would gain from feeling fear, resulting in a being with weak emotions like empathy and compassion, a terrible disease for one who was destined to be a monster. As the fights went on, Aaron complained to Kay because he still hadn't discovered his reason for existing. The only thing he learned was how to knock out his opponents according to his orders. Kay tells his boxer off, saying he told him a long time ago, but he's the only one who won't accept it. The only thing his insecurity does is tarnish the essence of the sport. Aaron is tired of listening to the ramblings of a crazy old man. He might not quit boxing, but he's sick of being the puppet of a lunatic. After Aaron retired from under Kay's tutelage, the coach questioned whether he should give up on his dream. Could it be that an excess of strength becomes an inhibitor of itself? But everything changed when he appeared. The champion doesn't understand what's happening. His heart is beating so hard it feels like it's going to burst out of his chest. The pain he had caused with his hands since the day he was born, he could finally experience firsthand. Every muscle fiber screamed at him that he could die at any moment. The match went from being a fight to save you to becoming a death match. The champion feels like an idiot. Save him. He crazy? He was so arrogant to think he could save him without risking his own life. It turns out that many years in the past, Aaron Tight was a boy living in an orphanage who used to spend quality time with his best friend, Maria. She wanted to start a family with Aaron once they left the orphanage. Unfortunately, when the two kids were 11 years old, she lost her life at the hands of the love of her life. One day, the young couple had a meaningless argument, and in the heat of the moment, he pushed her lightly to get her away. However, the force was so great that the impact was more than just a simple fall. Aaron froze at the sight. He had been rejected by his parents at birth, and now his natural talent was destroying the people he loved. Why did a child have to be cursed with this power? Aaron asked himself the same question over and over until he met Kay, who introduced him to a new world, full of luxuries and pleasures, where he would always be sitting on top of the world. At first, the glory temporarily quieted his fears, but in the end, the emptiness he felt was so great that no matter what he did to fill it, everything was useless. Aaron Tite eventually fell into a severe depression, and just when he had hit rock bottom, an angel crossed paths with him again. It's as if life were giving him a second chance, as he found something more valuable than all the fortune in the world, the love of a woman who has always supported him. So no matter how difficult the circumstances, the champion will survive by any means necessary. Even if it means he has to kill the MC, he will survive. The commentators can't believe what they're seeing. Aaron Tite has just adopted the peekaboo stance. In his entire career, he had never used any of the techniques Kay taught him. He could seriously injure his opponents. Maybe this was his way of rebelling against Kay's system in the past. But the situation is completely different. The champion has decided to fight to the death. Bob Norris, who was also Kay's pupil when he was young, can't believe that old man has managed to make his dream come true. He'll finally have the fight that he's been dreaming of. Since his years as a soldier during the war, Kay always wished to meet the personification of superiority. Some time ago, when Kay was a young adult, he had the potential to become a world champion. His coach even considered him someone who would make history. But a totally different from the one we know confesses to his coach that he has decided to train to be a soldier. It doesn't matter how much he trains as a boxer or how much fame he gains. At the end of the day, it's not like he's saving anyone. Kay refuses to be a puppet in someone else's world. He wants to fight in a real fight in the real world. And so, after a few months, Kay became a prodigy according to his scores at the military academy. The CISO, he had never had such a talented rookie, but the real world wouldn't take long to teach him his first lesson. Humans aren't neatly structured into the order of civilization. They simply bought into the idea of acting under rules to forget that they are still wild creatures who are willing to kill in order to survive. In the primitive world he lived in, Kay had drawn his first blood. And if he felt no guilt, it was because tension between life and death gave him a certain sense of calm. So following the orders he was given was nothing more than a mantra to keep moving forward. After another, for country and for justice, every single enemy was eliminated. During this time, Kay managed to rescue a boy with reddish hair who would eventually seal the soldier's fate. Because on the way back to the base, the boy had a gift for his savior, while he told him that when he grew up, he would also become a soldier. His wish was to rescue as many people as possible. Kay was surprised. His actions had changed someone else's life. So after telling the child that he would surely be a great soldier, he felt a purpose that he never thought he would experience. After that, the routine was the same, completing every mission he was assigned and quickly becoming the leader of his team. Over the years, the soldier started a family, a loving wife who worried about her husband, and a son who had the same smile he did at that age. Both would be joyfully waiting for his return. However, the mission was extremely dangerous, but just as they tried to contact their comrades, the cry of one of their colleagues was heard nearby. The soldier, with his last breaths, yelled to his comrades to flee the area. Their comrades used to take them out. The moment the victim spoke his last words, there was perfect timing for a precisely thrown grenade. Without a doubt, the person behind all this is a formidable mercenary. Kay knew that this mission could lead to more casualties for his team. So he decided to forge a path on it. The soldier found the enemy leader's hideout, and from the sound of the gunfire, only one enemy was defending it. A mercenary of that caliber wouldn't make things easy. The odds of survival were 50%. However, for the love of his son, Kay had to get out of there alive, no matter the cost. The moment the ambush began, Kay was met with the enormous surprise that the mercenary he was facing was the very same boy he had rescued, the one who swore to be just like him. By this point, that child no longer had those innocent eyes, having traded for the art of finishing off his enemies. Kay didn't have to think twice. If he didn't take a difficult decision, he would not return to his family the same. After taking the life of that young man who gave him a purpose, something inside Kay changed that day. For a second, he thought the world had already taught him everything. But fate was about to show him the true nature of life. The mission was a success, and although the team could see their colleague looked paler than usual, the soldier replied that he simply found and eliminated the target. After a long journey back home, Kay began to feel the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. He felt very disoriented. 2 days ago, he was in a killer-be-killed world, and now he was in a setting where there seemed to be no problems. When Kay became aware that two completely different environments existed on the planet where his family lived, an indescribable fear arose from the depths of his heart. It threatened to devour him at any moment. Moreover, even when the soldier returned home and saw his family's joyful faces, he couldn't help but think. He thought about how everything he did to protect the world ended with him taking the life of someone who could have been his son. The after effects worsened drastically. Kay had frozen in front of his loved ones, and no matter how hard he tried to hide the truth, the nightmares began to feel more and more real. Every night he had the same dream where he was the one taking his... As was his habit, the soldier would wake up abruptly from his bed every night, which caused his wife to start worrying. After the last mission, it was as if he had ceased to be himself. The soldier knew he couldn't keep hiding the truth, so he told his wife every detail of the mission. Although he aimed for the young man's head so he would die in the least painful way, that memory wouldn't leave his subconscious no matter how hard he tried. It was as if time had somehow stopped, and he had to relive that tragedy every single day. She couldn't hold back her tears. She felt empathy for her husband because she never imagined the hell he was living in. Maybe she didn't know how to help him, but he would always have her support. A part of her was happy that he had returned safe and sound. She was proud of the man who risked his life to protect his country and his loved ones. His wife told him she understood in a way, since she never knew which day would bring the news that he wouldn't be coming back. Kay knew he couldn't continue with this lifestyle, so his next mission would be his last before he retired. Furthermore, if the danger was imminent, he wouldn't hesitate to retire immediately. One might think that Kay's life was about to take a turn for the better, but the general had terrible news for the soldier. His wife and son died in a car accident during his last mission. While they were on their way back home, a malfunctioning truck crashed into them, killing them instantly. Furthermore, the driver was put on probation, as it was concluded that there was only circumstantial evidence despite his negligence. So, since the law wasn't going to do anything, a blackout hits the trucker's house, and the man who took the only thing keeping Kay sane quickly subdued without a fight. When he regains consciousness, Kay informs him that he will end his life and his family's, but depending on how well he answers the questions, their end may or may not be painful. So the first question is, why didn't you turn the wheel to avoid hitting them? The man reveals that there were many people at the crosswalk, and since the truck's brakes failed, swerving would have caused it to overturn and kill everyone. So, faced with the difficult decision he was in, the reason for his actions was to save as many people as possible. Kay, due to military training, understands the man's thinking. He had gone through a similar moment at one point. In his situation, he would have done the same. Therefore, his family will be spared. The man begs him to please spare his lifetime he has left on this earth. He will do anything to atone for his sins. His daughter's birthday is very soon, so from one father to another, he begs for forgiveness. However, Kay tells him it's too late. Everyone dies the same way. If that man had been in his place, he might understand what he's feeling right now. When Kay was a child, he watched his grandfather pass away slowly. His eyes showed great sadness and fear as he said goodbye. The moment he took his last breath, a peculiar Kay. The beautiful memories they shared throughout his life. It was as if a part of him had gone with his grandfather. He thought that with that trauma he had seen the true nature of life, but he never imagined the world could be an even darker place. Kay continued with his missions as usual, but his aggression in completing them was more noticeable. So much so that his comrades began to worry about him. However, Kay replied that they had nothing to worry about. He passed the mental exam without any problem. However, during the next mission, when his platoon was in serious trouble, the army doctor called the commander to talk about Kay's mental state because although his medical report came back clean, when he conducted the exam, he noticed something strange. It was as if he knew how to perfectly answer every single question, as if he somehow knew how to manipulate the result to his advantage. And so, back on the battlefield, Kay confessed to his comrade that he had been enlightened. Life is nothing more than an illusion created by man, because in reality, they are free beings who must live their existence to the fullest. Those who are strong deserve to remain in this world, while the weak must struggle miserably until their death. So, he finally understood. If he wanted to be free, he had to risk everything to find out his destiny. The supremacy of a living being is put to the test when its omnipotence determines the life and death of another creature. That is the only meaning life can have. The mission reached its climax, and, while K was barely escaping death, an enemy soldier stood before him, who, having nothing but his hands, challenged K to a bare-knuckle fight. Our coach looked happy with the offer. It had been many years since he had a boxing match, and so, when a match began between living creatures, with no weapons at hand other than their own fists, each seeking to prove their superiority over the other, as soon as K landed a direct hit, he felt a catharsis that cannot be felt when using a weapon. So if he wanted to keep feeling the same way, he would dedicate life to the sport that can achieve the purest form of appreciating human supremacy. Back to the fight. Peter Kent makes an observation. While having strength makes a difference in the sport, technique is usually superior to strength in most of them, so it's terrifying to think that a monster who has dominated everything with brute force is about to use technique. The entire world is anxious to see what will happen. No one can look away for even a second. As the greatest match in history could end in a moment, Kay suggests that you be cautious. His opponent may not possess Jean-Pierre's technique. In fact, his skill is that of an average boxer, though it's more than enough to change the rhythm of the fight. He concentrates his strength and speed into his jab. It won't matter if you can see it. It would still be impossible to avoid, so you will have to act on his own. Judgment. Yu has made a decision on how to face the problem. According to the experience that Bob Norris has, he can see that Yu is throwing punches, but instead of doing damage, he's using them to redirect the champion's punches. A strategy that is absurdly risky, as the slightest mistake would cause his fist to fracture. The dilemma is that this is the only thing Yu can do right now, or else his head will be smashed into 1,000 pieces. The monster Aaron Tide's punches are so overwhelming that Yu's body trembles with nerves. Slowly, the number one boxer in the world is catching up to the rhythm of the one considered the greatest prodigy. However, the rhythm of the fight has changed. Yu has decided to increase his speed again because if he can dodge his opponent's punches, he can at least make his opponent's fist go through the wounds he already inflicted. Bob Norris, who was a world champion, can't understand what's happening. How it's that someone could exist to rival the one born to crush them all. Bob knows he has to stop the fight or else someone will get hurt. But as he continues watching the match, Yu starts to adapt to the champion's rhythm and somehow begins to surpass him. Bob wants to stop them at all costs, but both he and Kusumoto want to watch just a little bit more as blood begins to spill in the ring. Muscles are being, and not a single person in the arena could look away from these beings who had transcended humanity. Kay had achieved his goal. He had achieved his, "This is a real fight." Applause. The madness has spread through the crowd. Everyone wants to see these two take each other's lives. And even though Miss Tai tries to stop the match, the World Council would never let something like that happen. Kay demands they continue the fight with all their might. Whoever wins must demonstrate the pinnacle of human superiority. The man who can become a god and thus have power over life and death. The round has come to an end and Gus has a message for his boxer. It may seem like they're tied, but even he has a limit he can't overcome, and that's the amount of blood in his body. They might both be injured, but in the long run, he'll be the first one to fall. Although this doesn't seem to matter to the champion, as both fighters know that everything will be decided in the next round. Kate, seeing his boxer knows his strength has faded, so he tells him he must finish the fight in the next round. If he doesn't him now, the other guy will end his life. And so once Yu gets up from his corner, the final act of this fight has begun. Very soon the world will meet its new. Throws the first punch. The only thing he can think about is survival. His daughter is waiting for him at home and his wife begs for him to come back to her side. His organs might be failing, but as long as he doesn't hit the canvas, he plans to give it his all until the end. That was what pulled him out of his depression, and as time went on, his daughter gave him a reason to keep fighting. It seems the power of love has given the champion the upper hand as he has managed to graze our protagonist's fist, causing the impact to dislocate his left shoulder. However, Yu hasn't given up. As long as he has one arm to defend himself with, this match isn't over yet. His stance has finally begun to collapse. His body has reached its human limit. Aaron has to end the fight now or he'll suffer irreversible damage. The moment we've all been waiting for has arrived. The next attack will determine who lives and who dies. Will Yu become the god K idealizes, or will he simply bite the dust? Both boxers lunge forward to end the match, and as their fists move in slow motion toward each other's vital points, Aaron T has a memory of his wife where during a winter night he wonders what purpose we're all born with in this life. Does he have a purpose to fulfill? His wife is surprised that he still hasn't figured it out, so since she is tired of watching him torture himself, she tells him that the reason people are born is to love one another. Aaron Tig finally understood the words his beloved told him that night. Neither he nor you were to blame for being victims of their circumstances, but they are responsible for what they do to break the cycle. Aaron, the final second, left the pain of his past behind because he chose to hold on to his humanity rather than continue being a monster as soon as the paramedics rush into the ring. The inconsolable cry of a wife echoes through the entire arena, while in the other corner of the ring the story reached its conclusion. A new god was born. Those who did nothing to stop the fight as soon as the result was made official, a tremendous feeling of guilt flooded their souls. Kay congratulates the new champion on his spectacular fight because if he had listened to his teachings, the edge between life and death could have the same glory as the protagonist. And so once they got to the hospital, while Aaron is receiving CPR, his daughter one day exposes her father. Some people get scared of him because of his huge appearance. But Dad is actually really nice and friendly. He's someone who never gives up, and if he can't do something, he just smiles. Playing with my dad is the most fun thing in the world, and I know he'll always protect me no matter what. That's why I really love my... He was an orphan. Aaron Tig knew exactly what he wanted to do when he grew up. He wanted to get married as soon as possible and build the happiest family in the world, one that couldn't feel the pain of being abandoned and that he could protect from all the evil in this world. Fortunately, the resuscitation was a success. Yeah. But unfortunately, his internal organs suffered a lot of damage, and since his heart stopped for several minutes, the neurological damage was so severe that the chances of him coming out of the coma are almost zero. After a few days of hospitalization, the Tig family has reunited, and like a mother, Mrs. Tig tries to explain to her daughter that Daddy is going to take a long nap, since he tried really hard during his fight. However, children aren't that naive. The little girl asks if her dad is going to die. The mother can't be that honest with her daughter, so she decides to continue with her white lie and replies that Dad will wake up again after his long nap. Suddenly, the family chat. Carmen has come to apologize. If it weren't for her, this never would have happened. To which Mrs. Tig tells her she has nothing to apologize for. They were all involved in a circus, orchestrated by that lunatic, and knows very well there was a chance the person lying in that bed could have been you. Besides, Aaron decided to take the fight for his own benefit. Up until the fight's outcome, Aaron lived tormented by what happened in his childhood and dedicated his career to finding a reason that would give meaning to his existence, so fighting you was the best thing that could have happened to him. Finally found the answer he was searching for so desperately, so there's nothing to regret. On the contrary, they should be proud of him. Not everyone has such great courage to risk their life and discover their purpose. The best thing they can do right now is be strong for him. Because just as she told him in her vows, when they got married, I take you as my husband and I promise to be faithful to you for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, all the days of my life. And so, when night came, our protagonist's best friend greeted him as usual. In the 7th round, you became the heavyweight champion of the world. Who would have thought that kid would become the undisputed champion in 9 divisions parallel to this during a press conference? The people's champion officially announces his return. Jay declares that his first goal is to fight for the interim middleweight championship against Fabricio Santorino. As the weeks went by, the news of the new champion was making more noise. Nobody imagined that someone existed who could defeat the best in the world and beat them all by knockout. The world is in the presence of a supreme being, one who is the clear example of a god among humans. The curious thing is that his triumph has drawn his antithesis out of retirement, who, if he wants to have a fight against you, can contend for the interim middleweight champion title. Because if you didn't know, the interim champion is a provisional title awarded when the world champion cannot defend his title for some reason. So when the reigning champion returns, he must face the interim champion to become the undisputed champion. The next day, at Kay's press conference, Peter Ken asks him what his next goal is. Kay replies that he plans to return all the belts, except for the middleweight one, since that's the category where you excels the most. Although the main reason for staying in the division is to crush that bastard Jay. Bob Norris is watching the broadcast from his home and thinks that in itself, G's boxing is a negation of Kay himself, and he does it perfectly well because when he was world champion, he had to face that man in the ring. While his physical abilities weren't extraordinary, there's something about him that overwhelmed his opponents. Slowly, Jay made his way through the weight division until he became the #1 ranked fighter. According to Bob, maybe Kay hasn't realized it, but the most powerful boxer has never been Aaron or you, but that god who hides his true form inside the ring. The day of the interim title match has arrived. Who of these boxers will claim victory? Between them, there is nothing but mutual respect. After all, it was Jay who saved Fabricio's life. So on that tragic day, the brothers decided to uphold their master's honor. At first, it was anything but easy. Their rivals would fight dirty against them and the crowd continued to hate them. No one believed that a couple of thugs could straighten out lives. But after an intense title match, Fabricio Santorino was declared the victor. Joy flooded the brothers' hearts. Back home, their family screamed with excitement. This is the path that their master wanted for them. To feel what it's like to be champions through hard work. The boxing world decided to give them a second chance because the faces they had when they won the title again were those of two completely different men. So now, back in the present, the fight between legend and the veteran will begin. Fabricio doesn't plan on going easy on the old man. Since he knows Yu's sadism better than anyone, he can't let anyone else face him. However, as the bell rings, a well-placed punch to the champion's jaw causes him to lose consciousness instantly and get sent to the canvas at the start of the fight. The crowd is stunned by Jay's level. In all his years, he had never shown such power. And so, as the countdown continued, Fabricio managed to get back into the action. For a moment, he thought the old man wouldn't put up a fight, but he clearly, has every intention of winning Jay. But after watching his matches dozens of times, he concluded that he doesn't have a set boxing style. So the only thing they can do against an opponent like that is to go at him with everything they've got. Peter Kent declares that the brothers have gotten stronger. While at first neither of them had what it took, the Marco focused solely on improving as a trainer at Fabricio gave his all in his training sessions. They are now champions worthy of the title. Jay is proud of the Santorino brothers. They both forged a new path for their lives. So the best way to repay their hard work is to show them that there's still a long way to go. The second knockdown of the night has occurred. Fabricio never thought his opponent would be this strong. However, he doesn't have what it takes to face that. Demon, boxing is a sport that forgives no one once you turn pro. You have to dedicate countless hours to training and diet, suffering through painful weight cuts in the process. While the only thing you think about is how to end your opponent's life, the accumulation of all that explodes when the battle begins. Although for some strange reason, that man's punches felt as if they wanted to comfort your soul. Jay has the gift of learning his rival's story through his punches, thus finding out what boxing means to them. After a clinch that seemed more like a hug, the referee calls a timeout. And although Fabricio is bewildered, he can't let you claim another victim, which won't be necessary at all. Jay dominates the fight from then on. And as his champion's face, Fabricio stopped without any apparent explanation. What he's feeling is beyond imagination. There's something about that man that changes you somehow, which is why, after a laugh of joy, the commentators are baffled by what's happening. Fabricio Santorino has given up in the middle of the match, resulting in Jay becoming the new interim middleweight champion. Months passed since that encounter. Peter Kent decides to interview the protagonist again and asks him what boxing means to him. But faced with a vague answer about it just being about dodging and hitting, the reporters can't help but wonder if that young man is all right. While Jay is someone warm with his opponents, Yu is a beast of mass destruction who can injure you at any moment. After a few weeks, the press conference for the middleweight title unification will begin. Both fighters give their opinion on what they expect from the fight. While Kay responds on Yu's behalf, he mentions that there is no one who can stand up to his fighter. What's more, the next showdown will be the most brutal one they've ever seen. Jay responds that unlike his past statements, where he always called for a good and fair fight, this time he declares that Kay is no match for him. Later that night at the church, his coach asks Jay if he really intends to fight. What exactly is he trying to achieve? Jay explains to his coach that the universe is colossal. Sometimes he feels that his mere existence is meaningless. Does everyone exist just for the sake of existing? Parallel to this, in Yu's room, the moment to say goodbye has arrived with a look of deep sadness. Our kitty thanks his best friend for having spent his life with him, but sadly, in the natural cycle of this world, you have to say goodbye to your loved ones at some point. He has finally lost everything in his life. Is there any reason to keep living since childhood? He was only a victim of abuse, so it's time to tell the story of what the childhood of our protagonist was really like. In a place where no one's voice and no sunlight can reach, a mother who has been deprived of her freedom watches the best memories of her life on a television. Despite the inhumane conditions she lives in, she gives birth to a little boy against all odds, and upon first contact with his mother, the woman looks expressionless, unsure of how she should act. The cycle of life is the same for everyone, and although there are differences, Each person takes their own path and learns about the world in their own way. Despair, love, and finally, the end. In theory, everyone should experience these phases, although reality is somewhat different because just like every night for the last 5 years, a monster with the title of father would arrive at the place. You might wonder how the boy survived all this time. Was it because he was lucky? Or was it because his father had some humanity left? His tears dried up long ago. Perhaps it was the beginning of what would become his talent. Or maybe it was because of his father's constant punishments. Whatever the reason, the boy constantly wished for his end. Despite the world of unhappiness and pain, the boy's life was not extinguished. But at some point, his soul had shattered. The boy stopped having feelings because since birth, he was only punished. Though who could judge him? This was the only reality he knew, so he couldn't feel resentment or sadness for life itself. In the end, this was all he had. And while he wanted to keep going for his mother, whom he tried to protect in some way, the psychological abuse that woman suffered was so great that she only knew how to react aggressively. Yu ate dinner every night, alone, wishing he had a family to share a meal with and someone with whom he could feel what it's like to be loved. The front door was locked, the walls were damp, and the bathroom had smelled bad for days. In a sad 344 square foot apartment, this was the entire world the boy knew, until one day, something inexplicable happened. A foreign life form somehow managed to sneak into our protagonist's world. Yu doesn't understand how a small cat had snuck in, but as soon as it turned around, it started climbing the kitchen pipes. The prisoner, upon seeing he had a chance to escape, decided to take the risk and follow the same path until finally, after an eternity, the boy saw the outside world for the first time. The night was calm, and everything seemed different to Yu. He never imagined the world could be so beautiful. And so, as he followed the kitty, it led him to its protector, a young woman in her 20s whom I will call Lady. Yu was nervous. It's the first time he's seen another human being besides his parents. And when Lady approaches to ask about him, our protagonist gets anxious. He didn't know what to say. Everything he knew up to that point was from television shows. Lady told him there's no need to be nervous. Maybe what he needs is a walk down the avenues. After all, he will learn that all roads always lead to the same destination, from meeting a man who gave him the first piece of candy in his life to some rather unfortunate scenes, like a boy who can't pass his entrance exam. But the real goal of the walk was to get to Michi's house, who recently became a single mother and gave birth to some beautiful little fur balls. But besides going to see Michi's little secret, the view of the whole neighborhood is splendid from that height. The young woman started talking about how insignificant humans are in the universe and how exhausting it is to think about your own mortality. However, since Yu understood what she was talking about, he simply focused on the starry sky because it seems he felt something new that he had never felt before. And so, when the young woman said goodbye to her new friend, Yu snuck back home to his mother, who, upon hearing about all the wonderful experiences he'd had, began to teach him a lesson. How was it possible that he had abandoned her just like that? She simply asked him to please not do it again. However, the only thing the woman accomplished was making Yu lose that spark in his eyes once more. The next day, an idea wouldn't leave our protagonist's mind. He may not have fully understood emotions, but his desire to go out was so great that it was the only thing he thought about. So if he wanted to explore that world again, he would have to wait for the exact moment his mother fell asleep. Yu started wandering the streets that he had shown him, and after several minutes of walking, his new friend took him by surprise and told him that she was very happy to see him again. On this occasion, Yu learned a few things. For example, that candies are very different depending on their flavor. He also learned about the pressure some people feel when they are forced to make a living at a very young age. Although he also watched another living being grow, the days of exploration went by until eventually something changed. Yu asks Lady if she can keep going, and since she can't move forward, a good idea would be to take a short break, as she has to tell her little friend a truth. Lady doesn't have much time left in the realm of the living. Sadly, the cancer she has began to metastasize, so they had to remove several of her organs for her to survive. The problem is that it's getting harder and harder to keep breathing. When she was a little girl, she thought she was the protagonist of the world. But as she grew up, she found out that the world doesn't work that way. So, what does it mean to have lived? Did she have to do something to make history? Could that be why humans seek to leave behind descendants? Perhaps the only thing you need in this life is to know perfectly who you are. Unfortunately, our protagonist's reality was not simple at all. His mother began to hurt him with more brutality. Who, with the little strength he had left, asked her what her name was. The woman was stunned for a second. In reality, she was repeating the same pattern she suffered in her childhood. So she immediately took her hands off the boy and began to tell him how sorry she was. Since that incident, the mother and the boy began to grow closer, for example, eating at the same table. And when it was time to go to sleep, the mother asked her son what he had done outside. That night, Yu told her everything he had experienced without holding back, before falling asleep on his mother's lap. He had felt a peace he had never experienced before. But sadly, this was her way of saying goodbye to her son, because the next day she would leave in the only way she could to end her suffering. It turns out that Yu's father was a criminal and he married a woman of the night. The two were incompatible, but they seemed to live well for a while, until one day, when an infidelity was discovered, the man was unable to control his anger and frustration. The day before the tragedy, Yu was spending time with Lady. They both drew what they wanted most in life. Lady asks her little friend if he wants his family to be like the one in the drawing, and with a gentle nod, he makes it clear that it's the only he wants. So, why does life have to be so cruel to him? Furthermore, the worst was yet to come, because when Yu's father found his mother lifeless, he quickly went to see what had happened. The only one who could have done this to her was the one who lived with her, so regardless of the fact that he was just a child, the miserable man began to take all his anger out on him. Yu didn't understand why he always had to be beaten. Is it so hard for a father to love his son? Just as the man thought about ending his son's life. Our protagonist, he decided not to stand idly by. After using the blade his father brought with him, there was nothing the attacker could do to survive. Finally, Yu had gotten what he wanted. The door to his freedom would never be closed again. The thing is, life seems to truly hate him. Because when he arrived at the spot where he always saw Lady, the only thing he found was a portrait of the kitty. The MC decided to take his usual route, but he hadn't counted on the world having changed. The old man who always gave him candy had kicked the bucket a long time ago. On the other hand, that young man who studied day and night was finally accepted into college. But as he was walking back home to celebrate with his family, a small stumble would cost him his life. By the way, not everyone in the neighborhood was good, because when a stalker tried to go after Lady, the kitty defended the woman who always looked after her, even if it meant putting her own life at risk. Unfortunately, that scumbag ended her life and the lives of her kittens, and if you're wondering where Lady was, well, let's just say she said goodbye to this world next to her most precious memory. Yu finally understood the words his friend told him when they first met. The path you take in this life, in the end, they all lead to the same destination. Although sometimes, there are certain rays of hope that cross your path and somehow make things change. On the worst day of his life, Yu met Jay, who seemed to give him a bit of good luck. Only survivor of the kitty's family had gone looking for him. From that day on, Yu and Nekoman became the best friends of their lives. That feline represented the MC's past and all the good things he came to know thanks to Lady. However, it seems life was mocking him once again, and once more snatched away everything that mattered to him. The next day, at the Lions Club, the assistant coach is worried about Yu's health, so he goes directly to Kei to inform him that his fighter is not in the best shape for the match. It seems he didn't sleep at all during the night, and although he looks sick, Kei tells his assistant not to worry because Yu is actually in the best condition of his life. The day of the match has finally arrived. Everyone wants to know who the victor will be. So, old familiar faces have decided to attend. Everyone is waiting in anticipation to see if there is anyone who can defeat the MC. While Yu is in his dressing room, scenes of his victories flash through his memory. And just like the first time he flew on a plane, Kei has completed his masterpiece. It's the moment of truth. In one corner is the god of boxing, while in the other is Nuchist himself. The boxers have entered the ring, and among the entire crowd is the MC's best friend. Jay has come to see what his colleague has become, although he's not the only one. As Jean-Pierre decided to sit in the front row, where he tells his wife that he needs to know if that perfection he aspired to so much will result in him being left completely alone, or if he will find his salvation. Yuto Takeda shares a similar opinion. It could be that Yu taught him there are people he cannot surpass. And if his strength is admired and respected by the fans, he too will support him no matter what. Because deep down he hopes he finds his salvation. Marco asks his brother if he regrets his decision, to which Fabrizio replies that it doesn't matter. That man would have ended up in that fight one way or another. Victor, although he didn't want to seem weak, admits that he's quite worried about his friend, as that grim face gives the impression that the ring is already thirsty for blood, and finally Mrs. T tells her husband that the match is about to begin. It's obvious she hates Yu for what he did to her family, but she wants to see the outcome firsthand, of why her husband risked his life and the meaning he gave it. Ladies and gentlemen of all ages, the Battle of the Gods is seconds away from beginning. Fabrizio is worried about the old man. While he knows that Yu's strength is on another level, he knows Jay has a chance because even though he doesn't know how to describe it, his punches felt as if they were beyond the human realm. So enough with the chatter, folks. The moment the sounds, the bell rang, and the void of hell itself appeared in the protagonist's eyes. The crowd was paralyzed by what they saw. The fight had already begun and neither had made the first move. Yu asks Jay if he has the answers to his questions. Why is the world so full of pain and suffering? Why does life end without reason? What is the meaning of existence? But the most important question for the protagonist is to know who he is. If Jay won't answer him the easy way, then he'll take him down with the fist that dominated the world. Just 1 minute into the first round, blood began to splatter all over the arena. An icy silence fell over the arena. Jay's team is anxiously waiting to see what their fighter will do. They made them promise that under no circumstances could they throw in the towel. No matter how ugly the situation gets, if they want Yu to be saved, they have to trust him until the very last second. This match was unlike any other. First of all, you couldn't call it a fight when only one of them was boxing. And second, the punches, rather than being intended to knock him out, were being thrown for the sole purpose of causing pain. While the protagonist's performance against Fabrizio was terrifying. Right now, he is the personification of pure evil. Jay wants to know why his friend is doing this. Why he has to walk this path in a world full of hatred and sadness. Yu is sick and tired of people having to fight to survive their entire lives only to stop existing after a miserable life. Is that fair? His first friend met that same fate. It's sad to think that your only purpose in life was to come into the world to suffer. The crowd wonders why Jay isn't fighting back. Just look at the canvas. In only one round, it's already covered in blood. As the torture continued, Bob Norris saw something different in Yu. The source of his monstrous strength and the reason no one is able to face him is because he is the personification of human suffering. However, the audience doesn't understand why Jay continues with the fight. Clearly, he has no chance of winning and is only taking all the punishment he possibly can. In fact, he considered Jay a fraud because a little while before Bob Norris's professional debut, that man came back from his match after being defeated. But despite the outcome, he had a look in his eyes as if he had fought for the title. Since then, that look has stayed with him. It's impossible to describe in words what it feels like to see it. However, that guy, even if you hate him, always wishes you the best of luck. To you, the kind of person Jay represents is a weakling who disgusts him. Do you really think he could save you from his misery? Well, if he's so sure of himself, then he better be prepared to receive the suffering of the entire world. The fight continued on the same course. When the 7th round arrived, Jay solely dedicated himself to maintaining his defense. The commentators have no idea what to make of it. In truth, there is no strategy that Jay can use against Yu. Even his coach doesn't know exactly what his fighter is plotting. He had asked him to have faith in his actions, but how could he? When he was about to be destroyed, Jay has no intention of backing down, not even for a second. No matter how hard the road is, his mission is to close the distance and get closer to that poor boy. Because in truth, there are people waiting for him to come back. The orphans that Jay used to protect are glued to the television, wanting to see their mentor's fate, although they aren't the only ones keeping an eye on the result. The director of the orphanage asks Carmen if she likes boxing. Carmen answers not really, just that she knows the black-haired boxer. They used to work together back when. She was the manager of his gym and saw him beat the greatest champions of his era. Jay will be remembered as the people's champion, but the truth is, there's no one left in the world who can defeat Yu. A thought with which the director disagrees. As his opponent was once a boy from the orphanage, and if her memory serves her correctly, ever since she met him, she has never seen anyone stronger than that boy. By the 5th round, Jay's corner is worried for their friend's life. One day, out of the blue, Jay showed up with the news that he wanted to fight you. According to him, during his journey in the world, he met a little boy in a critical situation to whom he made a promise. Therefore, he needs to see him face to face again since there is something very important that he needs to tell him. Besides, it's not like he has much time left. Anyway, it turns out the People's Champion received bad news from his doctor a while ago. In fact, it's a miracle he could finish his training. While on the outside, he appears to be in his best physical condition. On the inside, he's pretty much dead at this point. Coach TJ already knew about his physical condition, so under no circumstances does he plan to send him to the slaughter. Jay asks the old man what the meaning of life is. It's a profound question that can have multiple answers, where many times the conclusion is that everything in this life is meaningless. After all, why would you try to fight for your dreams if you're going to die anyway? End up dying. The coach doesn't plan on stopping his fighter if he wants the fight so badly, but if he wants a chance to get to you, he should win all his fights in the first round, since the moment he faces that monster, he will have to use every last drop of his life force to endure until the end. If he wants to put his life at risk so badly and knows he might not return from the battle, his friends will support him so that he can achieve his goal. After a long torture, the MC notices something. It seems his opponent does know the reason why he has suffered so much in life. The round has come to an end. The coach asks his boxer to remember his debut. He hid that he had broken ribs from a car accident and still gave one of the best fights of his life. It's obvious he's always been a tough nut to crack. But if he's going to continue being a punching bag, it will be better for him to reveal his intentions with this fight. Jay tells his coach that boxing is incredible. Two people who think about each other all day cross paths in the ring and share their stories. Such an experience is similar to what love means. So his goal is to make you feel loved for once. Before the next round begins, Bob Norris has some speculation he wants to share with his partner. If he's correct, Jay's plan is to throw a single punch at the very end of the fight. Kay scoffs at Jay's desperate attempt to win. There's nothing he can do against absolute power, but the more and more damage the People's Champion takes, the anger in Yu's gaze begins to fade. The director tells Carmen that she looks sad watching the fighter, which is quite understandable to her. Yu is the loneliest person she knows. No matter how hard she tried to get him out of the ring, it was all useless. He has a maniacal obsession and puts in an unimaginable amount of effort. He can resort to any strategy to win. He was blessed with the greatest of luck. And yet, when he faced the apex predator in his world, he simply left a beautiful family scarred. It's truly sad that he has walked this entire path by himself. Some have a father, others have a mother. And if not, you can count on a brother. Even a friend can be your confidant, but there is no one who has been by his side. However, the director says she's wrong. Before this is a person who is with him right now, the one who has been by his side from the very beginning and has accompanied him in spirit since the start. The fight is getting harder and harder to watch. Drops of blood stained the canvas more and more. The man's face was bathed in his own blood, and every time he hit the canvas, after an immense effort, he would get back to his feet. Why is he trying so hard to keep fighting? Is there any point in trying to save that monster? Even if he succeeds, what's the use if history can just repeat itself? His body was starting to feel heavy and no one could do anything about it. The booze died down at some point. The crowd understood they weren't watching a boxing match. It was as if they were watching something more, as if after the storm, a brilliant dawn was about to break. After 11 long rounds, the fight has entered its final stretch. He looks exhausted for the first time in his career, and since Kay knows that bastard is getting to him, he orders his fighter to just go in and hold on, because his rival doesn't have much time left before passing out. In fact, Jay has started to hallucinate, as he asks his coach, "What are you doing here?" The poor man can't contain his emotions. That smiling boy he rescued from the orphanage, who grew up to be a good man, is being slaughtered before his very eyes. But even so, a father's duty is to trust his children, and he reminds him that he did all of this out of love. He was supposed to have something he wanted to tell his father, so he'd better get up and go tell him. Darkness, light, death, and life. Meaninglessness is knowing it all. Who will be the one to win this match? Jay understands that he has fought for a long time against the pain of life. But there's good news in all of this. Even if the world denies your existence, even if you're sick of the endless suffering and all the evil that can exist in the world, love is the only thing that will save us all. Yu begins to reflect that Jae is similar to someone he knew. When he was young, he saw a story on television where the God who created this world, as strange as it may seem, loves all his children and died on the cross for us. To Yu, this made no sense. If a God truly exists and loves everyone, then why did he make him be born in hell? Because if he loved him so much, why didn't he save him from that den? Why didn't he do something to save his mother? Does everything bad have to happen to him? What is the reason? Why he did nothing if he loves him so much? If he's not going to answer his questions, then he will hurt the son he claims to love so much. The only thing our protagonist wants is for that boy's questions to be answered. However, Yu's wait is over because Jae, or rather, Jesus Christ as God made man, came to restore that relationship damaged by sin. The world may be full of sadness and suffering. There are evil people who snatch away the lives of your loved ones. Money and pleasure can lead you to addiction. Anger, depression, and anxiety. These are silent battles, silent, that everyone fights. Some are taken from their lives by an accident, and others suffer from diseases that slowly consume them. Everyone is fighting for their life desperately. And some are not willing to forgive for all they have suffered, because when you have to leave this world, you will do it alone. The director asks Carmen if she happens to know what a poor old woman thinks about death. You may come into the world with someone, but when you leave, you will do so alone. No matter how many relationships you build with others, in the face of death, one realizes they are completely alone. But even knowing this, God sent his son to save us? Jesus loves us because it is his nature to love. He loves us not for what we do or fail to do. Jesus chose to come into the world. He knew he would be rejected, humiliated, and crucified. But he did it because real love doesn't seek comfort. It seeks what is necessary to save the beloved. Jesus doesn't define you by your past, but by what you can become in him. He came to break chains, to free you from fear, from hatred, from guilt, from emptiness. He did it with love, not with force. But if you ask yourself why God doesn't eliminate evil in the world if he is all-powerful, it's because God created robots. He gave us the freedom to choose. And with that freedom, humanity has often chosen selfishness, hatred, and violence. Jesus didn't come to erase the sinner, but to heal their heart. Furthermore, on the cross, Jesus conquered evil in its deepest form, sin and death. For that very reason, Jae is not afraid to risk his life in the fight, even knowing it could cost him his life. Kay doesn't understand why he hasn't given up yet. The wretch has managed to stir something in Yu's heart. If Kay doesn't do something, it will all be over. Kay demands the referee stop the fight. However, it's useless. Both the referee and the stadium are frozen by what they are witnessing. Kay can't comprehend what is happening. What is so special about that guy? Kay had never looked him in the eyes at any point. But once he saw the light in his gaze, he understood that. There is a force driving him forward. From that tragic day, they met until the climax of their fight. Jae had been saving a message for that boy. Yu looks terrified. He won't let him get any closer. With only 12 seconds left in the round, the whole world is on the edge of its seat, waiting to see how this fight will end. As Jesus closes the distance, each of the former boxing champions see how their tragedies have marked their lives so far. But just like Yu, who was backed into a corner, it's time to let go of the pain. Because just as that child suffered years ago, the only thing he needed was a ray of hope to tell him that everything was going to be okay. Jae accomplished the impossible. Yu had taken the first hit of his entire career. Time lost all meaning, and eternity seemed to embrace everything. Nobody could say a word, not even blink. Before them stood the sincerest example of love. From his birth, Yu felt something he had never experienced. It was the love of someone who would never let him be alone again. And just like that, when the clock had stopped, the match was over. Kay's plans were ruined. The world began to regain its happiness, just like the boy, who after years of suffering had once again recovered his humanity. For the first time in his life, he understood that he would never be alone again. Time passed, just as it does in life itself. Coach Guado had passed away, and his last wish before he died was to tell Mrs. Tai that he regretted not having thrown in the towel. However, she never held any grudge against him. She visited Aaron in body and soul every day of her life. So for her, he always acted like a father at all times. Later that same night, the wife tells her husband what happened and how their daughter is slowly starting to smile again. Maybe still not understand why this happened to them, but she will still live every moment with gratitude and love. She hasn't given up and knows that one day he will wake up. No matter how long it takes, they will overcome it as a family. And well, they weren't the only ones who moved on with their lives. Josh became an excellent mixologist. John dedicated himself to training every rookie who came under his wing. Kasim continued with the family business even though he found it boring. Jean-Pierre reunited with his father and decided to forgive him. Jay had far surpassed Steele. Misaki fulfilled her dream of having a lot of money, while Yuto was able to start his own family. Torinos continued with their happiness. And while some got a small makeover, others decided to take life with a bit more humor. Everything was peaceful in these people's lives. After that fight, the Lions Club closed its doors and Kay disappeared. It is said that he still regrets the past and lives with remorse. While on Jay's side, it's unknown if he passed away from his physical condition or continued traveling the world. And, well, as for our protagonist, let's just say that in an orphanage we know, where his current girlfriend is taking care of the children. Although accidents that can hurt a lot in the moment happen, just as he once lost everything. When Yu was on the other side, he asked the boy if he was okay. He understands life can be very painful, but luckily for him, he has good news. Just as the stars are shining tonight, love will be the answer to all his problems because it can even achieve the impossible. And he is the living proof. My son. This could be the end of the story. But there is still an epilogue to know the true ending. Two old rivals and co-protagonists of this adventure will settle their debts once and for all. But as always, let's go back to the past. So let's go back to before. You and Jay's fight find out how these two cross paths, because the world stage, Kay is surprised by his fighter's progress. Ever since he started thinking only about boxing, his winning streak has been on the rise. However, when a boxer accumulates several victories, the fear of falling also increases. And if he is not prepared for what's coming, the first defeat can come quickly. As soon as a fighter suffers his first fall, that's when it will be known if he will fail or learn from the mistake. But something Jay was blessed with is the fighting spirit of never giving up. And so, Jay fought his way to a chance to fight for the welterweight title of Korea, with his opponent being a brute named Ishida. Kim yells at Jay that he must prepare. Maybe he faced great rivals in the past. But his opponent is the first great monster he's going to face. Ishida is a talented boxer, but it's unknown why, if he has what necessary to go to the world stage, decided to stay in Korea. In fact, he even faced Rock K in his prime, who despite having dominated the first round, had a look of absolute worry on his face. Shida's specialty is studying his opponent in the first round. That way, he learns all of their attack patterns, and so at the start of the second round, he can easily defeat his opponents. Therefore, if Jay can't beat him in the first round, defeat is guaranteed. Besides, Coach Kim has no idea how to beat him. If they want to fight a long-term battle, Shida's boxing is perfect against boxers like Jay. Of each movement creates hard-to-break habits for every fighter, and Shida knows how to read those movement patterns, so the effort Jay is so proud of might be his greatest weakness this time. So, while they come up with a plan, the best thing to do is stick to the same training routine. Jay tried shadowboxing with an image of Shida in mind, but he soon found out what his coach was talking about. However, an old rival happened to be passing by. Rock Kang tells Jay it's been a long time, and from the worried look on his face, he must be like that because of Champion Shida. That's why he's going to give him a little advice. He must clearly be worried that all his hard work will be for nothing, and does this perfectly because they have similar styles. Kang feels remorse for his fight against Shida. He became obsessed with not being good enough, so when he gave it his all in the first round, fear consumed him and prevented him from showing his true effort. Rock didn't lose because he didn't train enough, but because he didn't trust himself more. Like when Kunaguero Agnes from the Manhwa Tower of God has to trust his brilliant strategies without hesitation, so if he doesn't want to repeat history, just learn from his friend's mistakes. Besides, according to Rock, he has potential. In his last fight, he made almost perfect moves, as if he were trying to beat a monster even bigger than Shida. If he can move on inertia, just like in their match, the odds of winning will be on his side. For that reason, Jay later goes to his coach to tell him he found a solution, which was quite ironic, since Kim had arranged private lessons for his student, with the teachers being none other than the former world champion Yuto Takeda and his trainer, Misaki. After several months of hard training, Jay has returned to Korea for his title fight. He never imagined the world stage would be on another level, so the first thing is the face-off at the weigh-in, and Shida made the weight without any problems. And while he has a good physique for the weight class, as soon as Jay took off his shirt, everyone present was left speechless because the physique on that kid was out of this world. He also made weight, So while Coach Iida starts devising a strategy, the champion is someone more direct and tells Jay he's expecting a good fight. But as they touched gloves, something inside Shida was disturbed. His internal metronome, which he uses to read his opponents, starts moving faster. It seems Jay's. The next minutes before the start, the coach tells Shida that if he wins, they'll go to the world stage. If he gives the world a chance, he's sure to find rivals who will motivate him to get serious. And if you're wondering why Shida is so disinterested, it turns out that ever since he was born, nothing has ever gone beyond his expectations. If he trained to win the world title, Yuto Takeda was overshadowed by a monster he could never beat. Even a genius like Shida knows his own limits, and there's no way he could ever match you. Although there was one time when he was a student, he faced a guy he was never able to read. His movements. He hasn't felt the same since that fight, so he hopes Jay can make him have some fun. However, the moment the bell rings, the champion was sent to the match just a few seconds after it started. The coach feels they greatly underestimated the challenger, though he'll need much more than that to beat Shida, because right before the impact, he managed to reduce the damage as he landed his glove. The champion is slightly surprised, but still not enough to be amused. If his timing is right, next punch will be slower this time, or, well, that's what he thought. It turns out Jay went through a hellish training regimen. The first week seemed pretty easy. However, he couldn't understand how the champion, who did the same routine, was surpassing him by a long shot. Jay wasn't going to give up so easily. He would give it his all, even if it pushed him to the limit. The weeks went by, and although the training itself didn't change, the intensity of it kept increasing. It followed. During this time, Jay learned a valuable lesson, and Yuto, having retired, they still possessed a fearsome determination. Every move he made was filled with purpose. As if he wanted to be better, even though he was no longer a professional, Jay took this as a lesson in humility. Because a retired boxer trains harder than someone trying to become champion of his division, he must take his training seriously from now on. By the 9th week, Jay felt his body was heavier than usual. After a long torture, he had entered the abyss where Yuto once was. That dark place similar to when Bam was forced to join Fug in the Manhwa Tower of God. According to Misaki, if he doesn't give up, he will soon break through his limits. Back at his opponent again, and the champion was on the canvas once more. If he goes down again, he'll be defeated by technical knockout. Ishida was a child loved by his musician parents. However, since his father had a lot of debt, they were to pay back everything they owed, resulting in Ishida, at the age of 9, witnessing the moment his father was kicked out of the house, and just like that, all the things that brought him joy were pushed aside, causing Ishida to feel disinterested in everything in his life. Ishida gets to his feet before the count is over and admits that his rival is quite strong. Apparently, his training with the former champion did help him some. Misaki tells Yuto that he isn't surprised by this result. Effort isn't just about hard work, but about sacrificing everything that can make you happy: pleasure, diet, hours of sleep, destroying your social relationships. You push aside everything that gets in your way, because your ambition to win in life is more important. In some cases, such obsession can achieve remarkable results, and just when Jay was about to defeat the champion, the timing had already been calibrated. Shida is about to show him his true strength, because no matter how much he gained through training, geniuses are born with all of that. The first round has ended, and since Kin knows the odds of winning have dropped, he tells his fighter that if the fight gets worse, he won't hesitate to throw in the towel to save him. However, as soon as the bell for the second round rang, Shida has his opponent's timing down and with his counters. He drops him in seconds. The champion thought the fight would have ended there, but something doesn't feel right. His abdomen is burning for some reason. Apparently, his opponent hasn't given up, and Shida thinks Jay's strategy is risky. He's basically going to take the punishment just to be able to land a counterpunch. Shida knows that if Jay is willing to take damage, then he'll punish him by aiming for the head so that he receives the most damage possible. The champion's coach is surprised. Many have tried this strategy, but Jay is the first one it's actually working for. Supposedly, when you get hit with a counter, your body receives a signal that stops you from moving for a split second. So it's shocking that this kid keeps moving despite everything. Although, in reality, Jay's secret is the massive amount of muscle fibers. He developed the most terrifying punch is the one you least expect. Then if you're consciously planning to take it, you can endure it and thus throw a counter punch. Besides, he was training with a world champion who beat him to a pulp day in and day out. Determination is the best weapon a mortal can have against a genius, and Shida can see that his rival won't go down easily. His neck muscles are so thick that they disperse the damage. So a better plan will be to land a hook to the liver. A blow that, no matter how tough you are, delivers so much pain it can bring anyone to their knees, whoever it is. However, Jay must have predicted this strategy and lands at the champion's face, sending him to the canvas once again. Kim tells his fighter it's now or never. He has to take advantage of his lead or it'll be too late. The champ has no intention of going down without a fight, and after replicating the move Jay hadn't seen in years, Ishida used is the exact same one Baik used in his first fight against Jay. Ishida knows this move very well because in reality, the only opponent who ever sparked his passion for fighting was the one and only Baik Sunan when he was a student. His replication may not be perfected, but the damage caused is just as powerful. No matter how many times you get up, the result will end up being the same. Kim knows they are in serious trouble. Ishida might have run out of tricks up his sleeve, but if Jay doesn't plan on making his work pay off, there will be no choice but to throw in the towel. And just as Ishida was about to end the fight, the bell saved Jay at the last second. The challenger is barely on his feet. Kim tells the student he can quit, that it was a great fight. However, Jay replies that it's still too soon. There is still one last resort I can use. Round 3 has begun and Ishida continued to dominate the fight. Although this is part of Jay's plan, his coach pointed out that the champion started walking strangely, which clearly indicates he's at his limit. Besides, Jay surpasses him by a long shot in one aspect. He can endure pain. Geniuses are so confident in their abilities and that they can end fights in the moment they wish that when they find a rival who pushes them to the limit, they don't frequently experience accumulated damage. When a guy like Jay, who has taken beatings his whole life, shows up, overcoming talent. Music. Jay knows that counterpunch perfectly, so it is time to end the fight. Both fighters fell to the canvas at the same time. Whoever manages to get to his feet will be the winner. Family and friends are worried about Jay, and when the count reached 6, Jay begins to remember the bitter moments since his journey began. But now it is time for him to finally shine. A new welterweight champion has been born. The coach goes straight to his boxer to congratulate him. Both he and his father know how hard he has worked, so they are thrilled that he finally made it. And Ishida is shocked that he lost. His first defeat would be against another genius, although he is glad that someone strong taught him a lesson in humility. Steel, who watched the fight on television, knew who would win in the final moment. While one was overconfident in his talent, the other never stopped, fighting to overcome his fears. That is why as soon as talent was pushed aside, Ishida had no more tools to keep fighting. Steel is proud of his little buddy. He never believed that brat would become a champion. Meanwhile, in Seoul prison, some delinquents are waiting for their leader, who has been released after a long sentence. However, those who seem to be the albino's allies are nothing more than traitors. They are looking to finish off Baik for all the problems he has brought them. The albino is sick of these kinds of ambushes, so he tells the thugs to attack all at once or else he will kill them one by one. The guy was defeating his opponents, but as soon as he beat the last of them, the second wave was about to begin. Baik wondered at that very moment. When was the first time he felt humiliated after a long journey to America? Baik could not get that question out of his head. Was it when he lost against you? Was it when he knew he would not fulfill his dream? The guy, after having given up the criminal life, passed out a few feet from Josh's uncle's restaurant. The redhead, being a good person, decided to feed the beggar because he looked in bad shape. While Wilson was eating, he saw that Josh was once a boxing prodigy. Technically, he was so good that he won the Golden Gloves in the United States, though he had to quit boxing because he could not measure up. The passion in Baik began to ignite his body, so he wants to face Josh one way or another after smashing his plate against the wall. Josh, feeling offended, accepts the ungrateful man's challenge. Out behind the restaurant, the fight has begun, and by sheer coincidence, an old character was in the area, being none other than the coach and father of Jean-Pierre, who I'll call Alex Armstrong, who sees that, even though Baik doesn't raise his guard, it's clear he knows the sport. However, something doesn't seem right. The moment that Baik was about to throw his special punch, something prevents him from moving how he wants. During his gangster years, he suffered a leg injury that hasn't healed to this day, causing the white-haired man to be unable to move freely and get put to sleep with a solid hook. Josh tells him he should be more grateful. He might not be in his prime anymore, but no pathetic being will ever measure up to those two geniuses in Korea. Armstrong tells him that he can change his future. If he wants to turn pro, then he can visit him at his gym. Later that night, The white-haired man was left wondering if he should take that man's offer. Everyone seems to be fulfilling their dream, except for him. Whether it's starting a family, confessing to the love of your life, getting the physique you've always wanted, or simply traveling the world. These dreams made it feel like that genius had stopped soaring a long time ago, because as he walks through the city, the memory of his old school colleagues haunts him, reminding him that despite being their boss, he has simply wasted his life all this time. Even that kid he used to bully managed to achieve his goal of becoming a champion before him, although they're not the only ghosts that haunt him. The memory of knowing he'll never be the best in the world and that people don't see him as having enough potential to conquer the world caused the young man to question why he's still living if he's so pathetic. Jean-Pierre tells his coach that he seems to be in a good mood, and after explaining what happened that afternoon, Armstrong is completely sure the young man will come looking for him. Obviously that he wants to polish his techniques to make him a champion. But when he first saw him, he knew he had a deeper reason for wanting to better himself, and in fact, it didn't take long for that kid to walk into the gym. Baik tells Armstrong he wants to be his student, which the coach immediately accepts. Although, well, he has to pay the fee first. Being one of the best coaches in the world, he charges a lot, but luckily for him, he'll get a discount if he gets a job at a certain restaurant where he screwed up. It would be more than enough to pay his fee. Baik felt humiliated by how he was treated, though he knows he doesn't have many other options. The next day, he went to Josh's uncle's restaurant to kindly ask if they'd let him help. In the kitchen, Josh doesn't seem to hold any grudge against him, but if he wants the job, then he'll have to apologize. Baik feels indignant. Feels about how they're treating him again. While his fragile ego has taken a hit, he has no other choice if he wants to change. The white-haired man had never apologized until that moment, but as soon as he did, his heart felt a bit of freedom. It seems that wounded child was starting to grow up, little by little. After several weeks working as a dishwasher, the young man thought he was living in an illusion, but if he wants to keep forging a path, then he has to leave the past behind and walk toward the future. The next day, at Armstrong's gym, Jean-Pierre's face says it all. He's come to sign up, having discovered what it takes to earn minimum wage. After a long time, he can finally pay his new coach for the first month, who upon teaching him the basic jab cross, Baik replies that he's more of a kinesthetic learner, able to learn better through real experience, but Arms tells him that he didn't do anything he was taught. His center of gravity is shaky, his leg injury has limited him. He was probably considered a genius in the past, but that orthodox boxing style he used to have is now almost impossible for him to perform. Baik refuses to tolerate being looked down on. He could defeat anyone in the gym, especially the seaweed-haired champion. If they just let him have one round against him, he would show everyone what his level is. Armstrong doesn't plan on sending a kitten into the tiger's cage, so if he wants the right to a fight, then he'll have to beat one of his students who will soon turn pro. The can see that Bon adapted to fighting despite his injury. Surely if it weren't for it, he would have been one of the greats. But that's a memory that lives in the past. Bon starts to get overwhelmed, and as soon as his leg trembles from the pressure, Armstrong stops the fight so no one gets hurt. The albino complains to his coach for stopping the match. He had him right where he wanted him. If only they would let him fight for real, he could show his true power. Jean-Pierre is sick of hearing the kids yelling, so he's going to teach him a lesson so he learns his place, using only his right arm. If the kid can last 30 seconds, he'll consider him the winner. However, as soon as the bell rang, the power difference was instantly noticeable. Bon knows he could have been knocked out, but this guy didn't do it on purpose. His plan is that tenths of a second he will torture him with all the punches he can take. Even after retiring, Jean-Pierre is still a beast, who sends the problem child to sleep. So, as soon as he regains consciousness, the coach tells his pupil, "You've probably realized it by now, but you stopped being a genius a long time ago." Bane had no choice but to keep pushing forward in life, as he started having his first professional matches. Armstrong put him on a training regimen where his goal was to increase his stamina, but his biggest challenge to overcome would be getting rid of his old fighting style. While it had gotten him some victories, at some point he would discover that it wouldn't be enough. After several months of hard work, the albino finally matured. He trains hard every day, earns an honest living, and is surrounded by good people. Who would have thought that he was so childish for years and that an ordinary life wouldn't be so bad by not wanting to be the best all the time and understanding that there are monsters he can't overcome? Accepting that he is simply a human being has made him feel alive again. Armstrong tells Bond that maybe he's still a rookie, But now he's #1 in his division, so his time to face the world has come. For that same reason, his coach found him a fight he couldn't refuse. In fact, his opponent was very interested in facing him. His rival will be the welterweight champion of Korea. Bon went in search of the only one he could call a friend, and he needed to speak with him in private because he had a question for him. How would you react if the person you hate most in your life showed up 10 years later and apologized for what they did to you? Josh gives the obvious answer and says it would be scary. And so, with the albino having no other choice, no matter how nerve-wracking it might be to apologize, the right thing to do would be to mend his relationship with Jay. But as soon as Kim and the champion arrive to say hello, Bon is perhaps more mature and returns the greeting, but as Jay tries to shake his hand, something in the albino snaps. At first, he planned to apologize, but as soon as he saw his eyes, he knew he still had the same look as before, so he decides to act tough and rejects the hand. Shake. He might be feeling a whirlwind of emotions right now, but the only thing he needs to focus on is not losing. Armstrong tells his fighter that he must be cautious. The champion's stamina and mental strength are exceptional, so he shouldn't force the fight. His mission is to look for the right moment to land a knockout, but Bon says that won't work. That guy always gets back up no matter what. So that once the bell rings, Bon wants to test the champion's current level and gives him the same taunt he used when they were kids, but with the huge difference that Jay is now stronger, and with just one punch, he sent him to the canvas. The man in front of him is no longer the same weak little kid that Bon used to torture. Bane gets up with what little dignity he has left. He can't believe a nobody knocked him down. Soon as Jay takes the lead, all the time spent training with Takeda begins to show in his powerful strikes. As Bon continues to take a beating, he wishes when this guy got so strong. After the first round ends, Jay is on his guard. Since he doesn't know his rival's true condition, he thinks he's hiding his best moves. However, Armstrong tells his fighter to stay calm. If he keeps up this pace, he'll be overwhelmed by the brute force of the champion. Baik tells his coach that he has to try fighting in his old style. That's the reason he's been in rehab. If he didn't, it's like he's lying to himself. So as soon as the bell rings, he'll finish him. Armstrong thinks he's an idiot, but he'll let him do whatever he damn well pleases. Because while he can increase his speed and with a direct hit, the more punches he lands on his opponent, his leg will slowly wear down, causing his speed to start decreasing. Though the challenger has used his special move, the countless hours of training since childhood allowed him to block Baik's best attack, who, while trying to dodge a counter, finds his leg has betrayed him. The canvas for the second time. Baik can't quite understand what's happening. Could it be that he can't take down this monster? The challenger gets up with the little energy he has left. One more stumble and it will be his end. Baik clings fiercely to his boxing style. However, after a well-placed straight to his face, his hopes of winning have vanished. History has repeated itself. Baik feels like the whole world is starting to leave him behind. It seems this is the end of his career, but the euphoric shout of his coach brings him back to his senses. Armstrong demands that he get his guard up. Is he going to throw everything he's fought for down the drain? Wasn't he supposed to want to be strong and famous? The path of a professional boxer. So if he plans on losing, he'd better do it. After he's given it his all, challenger's pride is reborn. The white-haired fighter barely manages to get back on his feet because this time things will be different. If he can withstand the last 30 seconds of the second round, he still has a chance to win. And so, after the bell rings, Armstrong tells his boy that he is finally acting like a professional. So if he wants to win, he'll have to grow up once and for all. Kim can see it at a glance. The white-haired fighter's guard is more solid. His plan is to focus solely on defense while buying some time to recover. Besides, if Jay continues with his flurry of blows, a simple clinch is more than enough to stop him. Armstrong's plan is to let Jay take the initiative so that he leaves openings for Baik to counterpunch. Boxing isn't a fight or a war, but a sport where the score also counts. Kim never thought that someone with Baik's personality could set aside his pride and win this way. However, no matter how good his plan is, Jay's experience surpasses him, and it will be very difficult to take the title from him. Baik fights tooth and nail to avoid being knocked out. Kim acknowledges that he's proud of his rival, but not for being an outstanding boxer, but because despite being average, he still clings to victory even when he has everything against him. The rounds progressed. The white-haired fighter, the more he was hit, kept thinking that just when he wanted to be someone else, when his path crossed with Jay's again, he felt he had hit rock bottom once more. Armstrong screwed. Unless Unless he pulls a miracle out of thin air, they're going to lose. The smartest thing would be to quit to maintain his integrity. However, Baik tells his coach to remember what he told him. If he's going to lose, it'll be after he's given it his all. And to be honest, he still has a little left in the tank, but he has to be honest with himself. He envies how his opponent works so hard and how he has lived an honest life. Also, how their fists are so different. While Jay has a punch like the kick of a mule, Baik had to refine his skills, and luckily for him, he had the expert in technique. After watching the former champion train in his gym after countless repetitions, the white-haired fighter managed to develop a punch similar to Jean-Pierre's. It's still too early to give up. He can't let down the friends who believe in his hard work. However, no matter how much the challenger tries, the champion surpasses him in every way. Baik admits that Jay has gotten stronger. It could be that he's torturing him to make him break. Even if that happens, he wouldn't feel bad about the result. But fate had other plans in mind. A small slip would cause an accident that would end up putting the champion at a disadvantage. The challenger can't believe what just happened. Is he sure Jay slipped by his accident? But according to his coach's instructions, this is his last chance if he wants to win. Jay tries to fight before the doctor sees his injury, but by being more aggressive in his offense, he leaves his defense exposed to counterpunches. For the first time in the match, the champion has fallen. Jay is at a crossroads, wishing he could be more passive and win the fight by points, but that would only give the doctor a chance to see his cut and stop the match. So even if his legs are shaking, he has to pretend he can keep fighting. However, Bond notices something strange. As soon as he managed to dodge one of the champion's straights, he could see that he had lost sight in one of his eyes. The challenger knows the tables have turned. He has all the tools he needs to win. However, this doesn't feel right. It's not the way he would want to defeat him. Armstrong tells his fighter to get it together if he's thinking of giving up. It's a terrible lack of respect for the one who is still attacking with all his might. The best he can do in this situation is to keep fighting with everything he has left. That last blow from the challenger caused Jay to lose his sight in both eyes due to the blood. But after a lifetime of training to defeat him, even the slightest movement of a shoe is enough to reveal the enemy's location. Climax of the battle. Remembers that when he was a child, being alone was enough for him. He believed he would never need a family, and he especially believed friends weren't necessary because without them he could be someone who stood out and who no one could look down on. So he never imagined that someone just as strong existed with everything he had gotten rid of, and whose strength stood out because he tried to surpass him day after day. It seems their destinies have always been intertwined. So the next blow will be the one that finally defines their relationship. Bond can barely stay on his feet because if he doesn't endure, he won't get back up again. For that reason, he must hold on, no matter what. However, the match had ended a few minutes ago. It turns out the doctor stopped the fight, as Jay's "Stop bleeding!" Armstrong asks his pupil if he's okay. Ever since the bell rang, he hadn't let his guard down. His audacity was what allowed him to keep fighting until the end, even with a badly swollen leg. Bond may have been crowned the new champion, but the guilt won't leave him alone. After all this, Jay is still in the same position as before. While he managed to surpass him by sheer luck, it's as if life is never completely fair. Although this doesn't seem to matter much to Jay, as he wants to congratulate his friend for staying strong. Bond knows that this is his chance. As they shake hands, he confesses that he is truly sorry for everything he did to him until now. He just hopes that he can forgive him. Jay's face is serious, because how is it possible that the winner is crying? In the end, he should feel proud for having put up a great fight. If he truly wants to stop feeling guilty, then he should face him again inside the ring so that after several months, the score between the rivals was 1 win and 1 loss for each, and if they went for coffee, it was because they were waiting for you to catch up with them. The three of them talked for a long time, forgot about their worries for a while, and spoke about what had happened in their lives during these last few years. In this way, time passed and the fights came to an end. Bond decided to help troubled youths and runaways through community centers, leaving the ring at 71 years old. Jay decided to open a gym where he trained numerous boxers, leaving the 83 years old. Josh decided to get into the liquor business and made a fortune after creating his own brand, retiring at 79 years old. John Taker decided to open a restaurant and donated food to the poor, retiring at 61 years old. Kasim unexpectedly resigned from his position as director and became a writer while traveling the world. Stopping at the age of 93, Jean-Pierre learned to paint, and it went from a simple hobby to expressing his own world of art, leaving it behind at the age of 85. Yuto Takeda opened a convenience store with Yamaguchi and lived a dignified life, leaving it all behind at the age of 88. Marco Santorino became the president of the Boxing Association while working to eradicate the corruption in the Xi sport. Fabrizio Santorino decided to found a social welfare organization and dedicated himself to helping vulnerable youth. Marcos retired at the age of 72 and Fabrizio at 73. Viktor Grigoriev decided to become an actor and had a successful film career, retiring at the age of 55. Aaron Tigu, after waking from his coma, became a doctor and dedicated his life to caring for people, retiring at the age of 85. And finally, in her last moments, Carmen thanked the love of her life for having an extraordinary life by his side. Every single one of those moments was beautiful. She was truly happy. By his side, you lived an ordinary life just like anyone else and left this world at the age of 84. And with that, the fight is over. Man, I'm getting emotional. My kids, thank you for joining me on this incredible story. The Boxer means a lot to me because it was the first manhwa I narrated as Dad Otaku. While it had its popular and not so popular moments over the last 2 years, it was thanks to all of you and the support that the first part received that allowed me to fulfill my dream of finishing the narration of this incredible story in the most complete way I could imagine. My friend, you have no idea how much I thank you for supporting me in every video, so I'll say it again. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.